Yes, we are running damn late. Yep. 5 minutes late. Shit happens. No, I haven't even plugged in. Fuck me. I haven't got my act together, have I? It's dropping out of the ear. So that was the useful thing about hair. It sort of keeps it in. Anyway, not that it really makes much difference. Okay. G'day, Alexander. And what's T1 saying? Hope you finished with those dusters, Harry. Nah, still got more to do. I'm not. I wasn't. Making sure to peel that. My middle name, Harry Late Serpanos. There you go. Talking about flat Earth, flat. Yep, too much flatness. Yes. You people involved in witchcraft. All those number games. You bad people. You'll be burnt to the stake. Just don't tell him. G'day, Trouble. Yes. Took my time today to sort things out. Yes. Yeah, trouble on the PC. Had to reboot. Things were sort of, yeah, I may have to do a bit of a spring cleaning sometime this week to sort of just get the cobwebs out. Oh, you'll be spanking me, is that it? Or pecking me away? I'll be pecked to death. So he's got his food ready. He's got his, yeah, it looks like it. Okay. Yeah. Don't forget the milk. That would be, you'd have nothing to talk about then. G'day, Honest. Good to see you. Sort of ramblings that I have to put up from T1 and 2 and T2. Never ends. Concerning. I'm glad as well. I was actually, I'll be honest, I was actually a bit concerned yesterday when I was setting things up. I didn't know what time, whether it was Greenwich time that my system would reset. Here he is. G'day, mate.
Hey, Harry.
Good to see the blue blocking glasses on and all that.
Yeah. Got to protect my redox potential and my ability to, synthesize melatonin, I suppose.
That's it. You look so stylish, mate.
I've been sent from the future with a warning.
That's it. So keep that in mind, both you two trolls. I've got a Terminator here to deal with you.
Yeah, what was Arnold's model? The T100 or something? I must be like the T1.
We'll accept
world's skinniest Terminator right here.
You cannot be the T1. We've got a T1 and we've got a T2.
Oh, that's right. That's true. Okay, I'm the T10.
That's it.
I'm 10 times the Terminator that T1 is.
That's it, exactly.
And 1/10 the Terminator that the Terminator is.
See, some people are happy that I was a bit late, 5 minutes late.
Yeah, you're just being respectful.
Exactly.
Just waiting for everyone to arrive.
Yeah, exactly. Harut was coming back from the gym, so... Yes, I've been trolled by T1 and T2. They're unrelenting, those two. As we want them, We can't have them, being too... G'day, mate. Aerodynamic sex juice. Wonderful.
Oh.
It's a great way of describing yourself.
I feel aerodynamic now with my hair, but I don't know about the sex juice part. That's probably not appropriate on stream.
Bukkake or whatever it's called, the Japanese stuff. Anyway, we won't go into that.
Bukkake, or whatever it's called, he adds on to make it sound unfamiliar to him.
It's not familiar to me. Oh, God. It basically increases nitric oxide synthesis once I get my bearings together. So, yes, it...
Sex juice does, you mean?
No, L-citrulline malate. L-citrulline, or citrulline, you can call it whatever you want to call it. Its designation as an amino... well, what it does is it's also important when you take it. It's actually best to take it 30 minutes before an exercise. And what it does is it actually starts saturating the, getting into the blood vessels, saturating, getting distributed all over the place. And then at that point, when you initiate certain exercise routines, whether it's walking, running, weightlifting or whatever, what it does is you get a boost of nitric oxide synthesis and an increase in oxygenation as well, which is really good because your blood vessels need that vasodilation and that extra oxygen. So it seems to really improve the general functioning of the blood vessels and helps with getting nutrients around, which is important as well, because when you're actually trying to build muscle, that's the sort of thinking behind it. And that's what it does. A bit like nitrates do as well. But nitrates sort of tend to, they don't do it in the same way. They don't tend to distribute in the same uniformity. But it sort of takes about a half an hour, and most people after they've had a big meal, they really can't handle too much exercise anyway. So it's not the best option. So yeah, I'd go for L-citrulline, definitely. Hope that's clear, sort of. I may have to do a bit of a video on that at some point in the future. Don't hold me to it. Don't hold me to it yet.
I'm at school right now.
Hey, and if you don't keep good notes, you'll be doing duties as well.
Is that where you were? I heard that you were on duster duties for Bart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had to watch his bloody video and get quite a few laughs out of it. His different points, and he uses old English as well. That's funny. So yes, that's what I was doing. I had to get a few laughs before I got in, and then because I'd already seen part of the end part of it, so I only had to see about 40 odd minutes. So I had a bit of time, and then had one or two things to do around the place, and then get on here. And then I realised my computer wasn't sort of working as so. I'd reboot. What's that? Next thing you what? Oh, that's what Luke thinks of you. He thinks you're a cyberpunk.
I guess it. Like I could. Yeah, I'll take it. I feel like I need a leather jacket for that.
Yeah, you do. You need the right outfit and all that sort of stuff. Stay in my ear, please. Yes, you sort of definitely need that. That's witchcraft. Do you realise that? Using numbers. That is witchcraft. Couldn't help myself. Tracy would have loved that. She's probably in tears at the moment.
Yeah, I wonder where is she?
Oops. Oh, don't.
Oh, I see her comments there now. She's here.
My actual thing just... God.
You're jumping already?
Yeah, I'm jumping already. Yes. Hi, Mandy.
Oh, can't see my hand.
G'day, Shell.
Who's the new kid? Is that in reference to me?
And we've had discussions. I've had discussions with Flapper about a couple of different things, including L-citrulline. Yes, it does help with a boner, doesn't it? Yes, it does.
If you happen to have difficulty in that particular area?
Yeah, really good for the boner. Yeah. We can both testify to that one. What is Bo saying? G'day, Boo. It's some rain, small thunderstorms. Oh, wonderful. Oh, look. We need a bit of everything now and then. Walked to and from the market and had blisters on the on the home stretch. Oh, God, it doesn't sound very, blistery. Had a blistery day. Yes, sort of painful. And yes. Hit the like. Please hit the like. Do not forget to hit the like.
I don't appreciate being called a folk in the pejorative, Luke.
I'll accept anything if I get a few likes out of it. Yes, please hit the like, because I notice a lot of people, like there's 20, 30 odd likes, and then there's like 200 or whatever people have watched it. Even put a dislike, I still get some benefit out of that. I don't care what you put.
That's still engagement. That's what, I don't know, I kind of laugh when somebody takes the time to thumb down a video. Exactly.
If you all want to thumb down, fine. I still get something from YouTube, some advantage. Yes. Okay, so... Yes, our dear flappers. In what regard? I hope you mean an acidic stomach. That would be the good first stage of good digestion. Alkaline in other parts is fine, but yes, in the stomach, yes, we do have different pHs. And in the stomach, you definitely want to be very low.
Somewhere around 1 or 1.5.
Yeah. Look, it's around the 1.5 around. Our sort of general, if you're on an ancestral diet in a normal sort of physiological state, it should be around about 1.5. Whether it's slightly below or slightly above, that's what our genetic pH is from what science has actually determined. By looking at the stomach, by looking at what it's able to secrete and all that, they've actually determined that's where it is. It's basically at a scavenger level.
Yeah, I was just going to say, which is actually lower than some scavengers.
Yeah, exactly. Some scavengers are about 2 or whatever. Many carnivores are in the sort of 3s because they eat. They're consuming.
Certainly speaks to the importance of eating fermented meat in some capacity for humans.
They're eating. Remember, these animals are eating fresh meat. So that's why they don't need that level of low pH. Where we're actually consuming products which are less, which are basically you could say they've got less. They've been around for a while, or they've developed a certain level of bacterial content, to be more precise, or pathogens in them. And our stomachs are designed to really just deal with anything. With the ultimate sort of eater on the planet, in a sense. We can range from a lot of things, including plants. We can range through a lot of things. Plants are just less optimal, but it doesn't mean we don't have the capacity to consume a lot because we don't ever seek them anymore. We don't have that capacity. We've lost that capacity. It's just an appendix now. So it's a limited way, but in the end of the day, we've still, are quite capable, but primarily because of the long period of the ice ages. It was basically initially what we could actually consume, but it's an evolutionary thing. It's an evolutionary step. I suspect those savanna chimps that I've talked about, now that they're getting into the sort of hunting and a bit of scavenging and all that, I suspect, given a couple of thousand years, they will probably go down the same evolutionary pathway potentially, or something akin to that adaptation in terms of stomach acid. So if you're having fresh meat, you can handle fresh meat at around about a pH of 3. But if you're having basically, meat that is a bit aged, and then it's good to have good stomach acid. I think that's another issue. See, a lot of meat gets hung up. It gets slaughtered in a slaughterhouse, gets hung up, then it gets transported. By the time it gets to your supermarket or even to your butcher, in many cases, it can be quite a few days.
Yep.
So
I think for most supermarkets, it's somewhere around like 30 to 60 days by the time that you're eating it, since it was butchered. Since it was killed, slaughtered.
Yep. So most meat will be higher in histamines, and also will be higher in the level of bacterial content. A lot of people that are having issues, it's usually because they've been on a plant-based diet for far too long, have issues with stomach acidity and stuff like that. I usually say, well, you need to get biosalts in there. You need to get basically acidifiers like HDL, and you need to get also digestive enzymes in that early transition, or you need to basically do a sort of a low carb or paleo or something like that as a transitional diet to more smoothly transition and just sort of reduce the amount of vegetation over time to slowly get, because the more animal products you put in naturally from animal protein, your own stomach senses that, your own, digestive tract senses that, and sends signals and starts slowly over time transcripting more factors that actually will increase acidity. but it takes some time in that transition. And sometimes people haven't transitioned properly because of a number of liver issues or whatever. And these are usually the problems that, that people face along their journey in that regard. And it jumped again. Fantastic. I fucking love it.
I've been experimenting with high meat for the first time the last few weeks, 2 weeks or so.
Yep.
Basically just learning from Dolan at Evolutionary Life that there's good evidence for all of the culture on high meat being many of the same bacteria strains that you need in your gut for synthesizing neurotransmitters. So basically they're all feel-good bugs. And when you look at it as a probiotic rather than like a source of nutrition, I think it makes a lot of sense to be seeding that into your gut from an ancestral point of view. And I've been finding it helpful.
Yep.
Repulsive, though.
Yep.
Like cartoonishly, irredeemably foul. But I notice that I feel better.
Yep. No, that's standard. 1 gram is normal in taurine. Depends what you're doing, how old you are. So if you're basically doing more physical activity and you need more muscle protein synthesis and you're older than 40 and you need more transport of aminos, then you can go up to 5 grams. But I wouldn't go over 5 grams, and I'd sort of stick to about 3, no more than that. So 1 to 3 is sort of the sweet spot, is the best spot. If you're doing a lot of, weightlifting, a lot of exercise and all that, yep, I'd go to 3. If you're doing, your standard stop, that most people are doing, like myself, I usually go anywhere between 1 and 2. So I don't really go too high in that regard. So yes, WT. Jared, can't see his hands
because I tried to wave to somebody and I went like that off camera.
Okay. There you go, Sam. There you know what happened.
Flipper the Dolphin. I had forgotten about that. The 90s.
Exactly. It's a long, long time away. Exactly.
Luke says I'm looking futuristic. I expect good memes from this look, Luke.
Yes. You definitely, for your melanopsin in your eyes, you definitely need DHA. So are you getting enough? I mean, you could take a supplement like the Rosetta, which is a high quality cod liver oil.
Refrigerated.
Exactly. So that's one option that you could take. But also retinol. Are you getting enough retinol in your diet? So are you eating enough liver? So the fat-soluble vitamins are very important. So I would basically focus on a lot of people in Northern Europe that tend to have eye issues is because they're piss-poor converters of beta-carotene, of the carotenoids. So even the carotenoids in meat can't be really converted very well. They're poor converters because your ancestors consumed shitloads of cod liver. And as a consequence, you had to down-regulate your conversion of beta-carotene for that simple reason.
Chris Nobby, the vegetable oil guy that was looking at it from first principles as best as he can through an epidemiological lens for the rates of heart disease in canola oil, he also made a link with macular degeneration and PUFA as well.
Yep. And that's right. That's correct. That's correct. It is.
So it would stand to reason that getting that stuff out of your diet would also help to improve your vision over time, although it will take time.
Yep. So I don't know what your prior diet is. If you have been consuming, as Jared said, a lot of sort of PUFA, in terms of vegetable oils, seed oils, and stuff like that. French fries and whatever else, fast food, and that sort. Then you probably have a lot of stored PUFA that is quite rancid, oxidized, and very damaging. So with stored PUFA, you need a low-dose vitamin E. So you get a jarrow. I've been saying this, most of my regular subs know about this.
Mixed tocopherols.
Exactly. It's a mixed tocopherols, and which have got different lengths, so they can penetrate cell membranes to different lengths to play the electron doning role as a way to deal with the oxidation of these lipids in your membranes and to stabilize them. And so that is one important way for all membranes, but in particular for the more because of the higher content of DHA requirements in those membranes. It's very important that they are protected in that regard. So a low dose vitamin E for the next 4 to 6 years, depending on your prior indiscretions. So I don't know what they are, and if you know that you've consumed a lot of PUFA in your past life, then I would go to 6, maybe 7 years on a low dose vitamin E. If not, maybe up to 4 years is more than enough. So you'll have to make that determination. Other things that, so PUFA is a critical one you need to get out of your diet. Simple as that. It's just one of those things you really need to get. And we're not talking about animal PUFA here. We're talking about vegetable PUFAs. So
more crucial than sugar, in my opinion, because your body knows what to do with sugar, at least.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, even it was really nice that recently Paul Mason actually had a video, and he actually talked about animal PUFA being very different, like I've been saying, and saying how it incorporates within the fat part of the structures, these sort of bilayers that I've been talking about, how it's integrated in such a way where it's much more stable. It doesn't become rancid like it comes in seed oils and stuff like that. And he said he doesn't see any science that actually shows otherwise. So he's not concerned at all, like Paul is, and other people that are a bit concerned about PUFA from animals. He's not concerned at all, which is pretty much supporting my position why I'm not concerned, because I look at the historical evidence of high consumption of lard in cooking over multiple generations, and we had none of these problems. So you got to be able to go back and say, I can show macular degeneration back when they were using lard in the early part of the century, or the later part of the 19th century or 18th century or whatever. It doesn't exist. And they had basically atlases of the eyes, and they know quite clear when it was in the, you started seeing sort of, I can't remember now, I think it was 20s, some of them first appeared, where they actually, because this was already a decade into seed oils, where they actually started seeing certain macular degeneration for the first time in atlases. And then by the 1930s, it was quite pronounced, and they actually basically even wrote up about it in studies. So it was quite clear that the relationship there was a close relationship. I mean, once we learned about lipid peroxidation, and we learned about the byproducts of and the rancidity and peroxidation byproducts that these sort of PUFAs create in mechanistic studies through the 80s and stuff like that, then this pretty much confirmed a lot of this sort of correlative data of the past. So we've pretty much nailed that is the key culprit for eye health. So in terms of supplements, I would get good quality DHA. So the Rosetta, which I've spoken to about in the past. And actually, I'll just give me a sec. Oops. Please be nice to me. Okay. Yep. This is there's the international side as well, but let me just basically share that. So this is the company you wanna be getting your product from. Okay. So you can get it in capsules. They're out of stock. God damn. That's the one I actually showed you guys last time, which is the one that I got for Dad, because it's good for in terms of putting phospholipids and and improving his brain function. So yeah, so that's there. This is the Australian side, so they are completely out. So I suspect that since last time I've been promoting them, they've probably been hammered. There is the international one as well, so try that and see how you go.
So do they sell their cod liver oil in capsules as well as just the
they do sell
liquid?
it in they do sell it in fish gelatin capsules.
So that would be more ideal if you're concerned about it oxidizing, if you can throw that straight in the fridge, right?
Well, this one they say you don't need to because it's stabilized. So, look, it's really up to people which one they want to go for. I don't, as you know, I do not recommend. I just say that this is the best product, and there's a number of people that endorse it. Out there, you got Chris Kresser, you got Terry Walsh. You got a number of people out there that have used it. Terry used it, because she as part of her protocol with MS.
Yeah.
So, and a whole lot of other people use it. So also other things for brain and eye function is choline, very important. So if you're looking for other supplements, choline is very important for that as well. Particularly the acetylcholine form, but I usually say take choline, have 2 grams of choline a day. A lot of Europeans also have issues with choline deficiency because they've had quite a lot of choline from the diet in the past. So that's another issue. It also methylates homocysteine. It also methylates estrogen. It also basically is important for neurological, for myelination and everything else you can think of. So eye health, brain health. So take your pick. Phosphatidylserine is another one, which is really important for both brain and I believe eye improvement. I know that it actually will silence certain genes when it comes to pathology of brain disorders. It's when it comes to eye issues, the evidence is still murky. We don't have sufficient science in that area. I'm looking for it, but I haven't actually found really solid stuff that I can hang my hat on and say, yep, I can rely on this. So yeah, in that regard, I hope that helped with that information. Sort of, and I would actually check. Let me just find that video. Let me see if I can find it.
There's some good banter going on in the chat.
Oh well, they'll have fun. The unrelenting. Is it between those two trolls, or is it more than the two trolls?
That's more than the two trolls, but it looks like a schoolyard level fun.
Oh well, you know
I
what
know
they're
you are,
like.
but what am I? Type stuff.
Uncontrollable. Hope they're bagging me, in a very colourful way.
That's
If
what
you guys aren't bagging me in a
T1 and
colourful
T2
way.
put the troll in uncontrollable.
God. At least do a good job at it, Make it humorous enough for people to laugh. Don't be crude. Being really successy actually finding it. Oh God.
What are you looking for?
The guy with the macular degeneration stuff. Where is it? Can you find a link quickly? If you
for Chris Nobby?
Yeah, if you can.
Mm-hmm. My wrong browser here. Oh no, everyone can probably see my screen and my reflection. It's so difficult to navigate my computer without the color prompts. Everything's monochrome red. I think it was with Ancestral Health he put it on.
Yeah, I just found it. I'm not sure whether this is the latest one.
I think it was this one that I saw. I'll throw it in the chat anyway. Oh, I have to actually go navigate to your... Don't have your live stream open. I'm not doing my job here.
So this is the one, I found the one that he did in low carb down under. I will just stick that in. There it is. I've just stuck the link there.
Is that the same one I had?
So that is there as well.
It's the exact same one I was about to link.
See, my computer isn't.
Must leave this open so that I can add links when I need to.
Okay, so this is the one that I just put the link there for, which was quite recent this year. So it's his most recent one on seed oils and explaining the mechanism and all that. So the other one that you may want to, where is it? I had it here as well. There it is. This is the other one this is the one that I actually, first realized how bad seed oils were. I watched this years ago. This was back in 2011. So we're talking about 9 years ago, more or less, nearly 9 years. When I came across Sally Fallon's about pretty much this problem with seed oils and how in 1921 they only had one actually known myocardial infraction, like a heart attack, in the US. Prior to that, it was, heart disease was basically when people had those, rheumatic fevers and stuff like that. That's what people were dying, from viral infections and stuff like that.
Congenital valve.
Exactly.
That kind of stuff.
Precisely. Well, it wasn't even that pronounced then. It was much later, and I believe it's more to do with the diet. It was actually rheumatic fever at the time, and that's what was killing people occasionally. And that was just basically, poor hygiene, health, just people living in squalor, things like that. But they weren't dying for heart disease. And actually, you can see, look at the escalation. The population doesn't grow that fast. Even if the population grew 3 or 4 times, it'd only be 12,000, not 500,000. That is an exposure to something. And the exposure is to seed oils, because nothing else really changed. Because up until the 1960s, you did not really have the modern processed food industry. That means you didn't have all these packaged foods. People were still eating real foods. A lot of real foods. I was still eating organ meats in this period and all that. What had changed is that we had slowly, over half of the century of the 20th century, we had displaced animal fats with seed oils. And they'd been promoted to us as healthier and cleaner, less smelly, which was another factor. You can cook your food and you can get less smells compared to animal foods. All these that's what they were promoting this to the middle class. And the middle class were lapping it up, were saying, oh, this is great, And they were basically poisoning themselves in their homes without realizing it. And this is the thing. Now, somebody did ask me in terms of the old cookbooks of the time, and this is you can actually download this old cookbook. You can go to this site here, which is part of the Internet Archive. I'll put it there for anyone who wants to download it, the old cookbooks that Sally Fallon talks about. So you can download it in different formats here, just so you know. There's the link. If you want to see what people eating, and I would just basically just come back to about here. Let me just, we probably aren't going to get any audio immediately. I'll have to, that'll come in its own time. Let me just stop sharing and I will reshare with audio, because I forgot to I always forget to put the damn audio up. So we're just not misrepresenting Sally. We'll just start at a specific point where she talks about the book. And somebody did ask me, because I did mention in one of my live streams, I think it was the Euro Asia live stream, the previous one. And so I can't remember who it was. I think it may have been Helmut Blister or someone, or Bank Supreme. I can't remember exactly. Somebody asked me in regards, so I'll put it on. And this is Sally. My computer could work bloody faster. It would be a real good thing. So I need to sort something out. I need to basically clear it up and do a defrag and do all this sort of stuff. So I haven't done it for ages, and it's just becoming slower and slower.
Let's go back now 100 years and look at how Americans were eating at the time. I have a cookbook published in 1895, put together by the Baptist Ladies of Monmouth, Illinois. You couldn't find a more representative group of people at the time. And they put the recipes together and sold the book as a fundraiser for their church. So we know that the people were actually eating this way. This isn't.
Yeah, so these are actual recipes that people provided to this book. This was a fundraiser. This was back in 1895. So these ladies actually created their own cookbook from recipes, and they actually got the names of all the different ladies that have done the different recipes and combined all these recipes. What were people really eating, back then? It's really important, 100 years ago, because we didn't have any macular degeneration. We didn't have any of these diseases of civilization, as we call them, to the level. We had some, don't get me wrong. I mean, we weren't ancestral. We were still eating certain refined things and other things like that. And diabetes still existed, and we know that from the Banting diet of the 19th century and other diets. So diabetes existed, but while people had diabetes, they did not have, these high levels of cardiovascular disease or these high levels of macular degeneration or cancer or any of these diseases that we ascribe to the modern world today. So diabetes has been around for a very long time, even from antiquity. While diabetes is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease, there are many people that are diabetics for many years and do not have heart attacks. So, it's a risk factor, but it's not, we need to be very careful about a lot of this sort of stuff.
Something that was made up by a dietitian. Now, this collection of recipes from the turn of the century is very interesting because it completely flies in the face of what our diet dictocrats are telling us. That the reason we have so much cancer and heart disease compared to a century ago is because we are eating much greater levels of saturated fats from animal foods. Yet in this little cookbook, there's hardly a recipe that does not contain butter, eggs, cream, or lard, beginning with the soup chapter and ending with the substantial array of desserts. Most meat recipes call for gravy made with the drippings and occasionally with added cream. Now, one interesting thing about the way people ate in 1895 is it seems that no one had heard of al dente vegetables, lightly steamed vegetables. All the vegetables in the recipes are cooked a long time, and many call for sauce based on cream. And in fact, it seems like the vegetables are just an excuse to have a sauce.
So what she's saying is that, all these undercooked raw stuff that cause all sorts of havocs in people's guts nowadays, people didn't do that because they weren't stupid. They knew they had a history of culinary knowledge that hadn't been removed from their own lives. That's important because today's modern people, most people don't know how to cook. We've been sold all this processed fast food, ready to heat up foods, and so we've lost our knowledge of food, our understanding of food, how to combine food, how to cook food, how to prepare food, how to do, turn off and minimize the the anti-nutrients. Like my dad does with his lentils, that he basically soaks them for a couple of days, or his beans for a whole week, but he doesn't consume them. He has one meal in the whole week, and he spends a whole bloody week soaking beans. He stopped doing that recently. He still does lentils because he loves lentils, and I have to say I love lentils as well, but I've given it up completely because of the anti-nutrients in them. But I understand where he's coming from. But he also does all these things to deactivate them. I'm not prepared to do all that sort of stuff and get poor nutrition. So it's a waste of time. For people back then, because they were poorer, they didn't have access to as much quality food, so they needed fillers, and plants acted as slight fillers, in that regard. So
the vegetable recipes include asparagus dressed in cream, 4 versions of cabbage with cream sauce, corn and eggplant fritters fried in lard, potato balls fried in good drippings, and parsnips fried in bacon fat. One of the things that foreign visitors to America noted in the 1700s and 1800s was that Americans were a butter-eating nation. We ate huge amounts of butter compared to Europeans. Observers stated that in America, everything was swimming in butter, including porridge, soup, meat, vegetables, and puddings. We had a very rich land, and we were a dairy nation, and no one was there to tell us that butter was bad for us. So we ate lots and lots of butter.
As one European that actually had described America back in the 18th century, he said, or was it 19? I can't remember, 18 or 19. Don't quote me on that part. He said, America was awash in butter. So what Sally's actually describing is exactly the way the world was then. People were basically consuming massive amounts. There's another character. people were consuming a massive amount of basically. I need to not focus on the stuff that's flying in butter, and that is really important that we understand that that's what people are cooking: butter, lard. These are the products. These are the products that kept us healthy. So anybody tells you pig's fat's bad, tell them to go and fucking take a hike. Pig's fat's got the lowest level of deuterium of all ruminant animal. Domesticated animals, sources of fat. So great for your mitochondria. So tell them to go take a fucking hike. They're talking shit. Even Laszlo, he loves, the academic that actually brought to the West the knowledge of deuterium. He basically loves eating smoked and raw pork, so he'll have a lot of smoked pork. He loves it. So one of his favorite, very popular in Hungary. Yeah, exactly.
Pork fat.
Yeah, exactly. It does.
Lard compared to tallow is way better.
Exactly. I mean, I know a lot of people. Even I get people go, oh, I prefer lard. I actually buy lard. I don't buy tallow. I used to, at most I'll buy butter, but I'm not really heavily into tallow. I get a bit now and then. I've tried it. But I prefer lard as well. Much tastier.
Tasted good, so why not? Seafood recipes in the little book from 1895 include fish a la creme, scalloped fish, creamed salmon, and creamed fish. The sauce for broiled fish calls for 1 large spoonful of butter and 1.5 cups of cream. Another very interesting thing about this book is that there's a whole chapter devoted to oysters. Americans ate lots of oysters 100 years ago compared to today, 2 or 3 times as many oysters per person.
A zinc-rich diet. A zinc-rich diet. That's what she's talking about. People were healthier because zinc is really important for health. Thyroid health, zinc's important. Fish also have selenium. Zinc and selenium, very important for T4 to T3 conversion. All these things, these nutrients, also high in iodine. So all the nutrients that are important for good thyroid function and good general health function are in seafood, and people consumed shitloads of it in the past. Not nowadays, but then they did. It's probably one of the reasons for a lot of the longevity stuff amongst the Japanese, Koreans, and many other people that consume a lot of seafood as well. So I won't go through all this. In the
Midwest, they were either brought in on ice by train to Chicago, or they came in canned from the Chesapeake Bay. Recipes for oysters include deviled oysters made with egg yolks, creamed oyster patties made with eggs and butter, oysters wrapped in bacon, scalloped oysters, oyster pie made with 1 quart of cream.
So, yeah, it's shitloads of animal fats in all these foods. In all these foods, there is shitloads of, animal fats.
Contain egg yolk, mustard, and vinegar. One recipe calls for olive oil or melted butter. So if they didn't have olive oil, which they probably didn't, they put melted butter on their salad. Then there's another recipe that calls for 1 cup of whipped cream. So you can see the salads, just like the vegetables, were an excuse for animal fats. Now there is...
So, she's going through and discussing about how these people basically, the whole purpose is, even if you had some vegetables, you just douse them and they'll literally drown in animal fats. That was the focus, get the fat in. Remember, these people you only had seasonal sugar. You didn't have a lot of sugar around. You got to get your energy from somewhere. And they were getting it because if you look through the winter months, through the summer months, it's going to be different. Late summer, early the fall, you're going to have access to more plant-based foods. But around the other parts of the year, you really have, low glycemic type vegetables, which you use as fillers, and you throw in a whole lot of animal fats in there. And that's what they were doing in all these foods. And so that's how you have to see it. Remember, these people weren't educated or knew about all the anti-nutrients and stuff like that, or what they did know is that it wasn't really good for their health if it wasn't really cooked well. So what they did was all their plants, they cooked them very well. So they actually diminished a lot of the anti-nutrients and also the really harsh fiber. So they broke down, because fiber, if you go through an electron microscope and look at fiber, it's got all these little like hooks. You want to get diverticulitis, like damage to your colon, just eat shitloads of raw greens continuously for a long time, and you will rip your colon to pieces. And also not providing it with sufficient, protein and animal foods and fat soluble vitamins, which are involved in the collagen degrading enzymes, MK4, retinol, and D3, that are important to basically build good collagen tissue and remodel. So that's what will happen to you over time. That's what happens on a lot of people eating that sort of crap. So just a bit more.
There's one salad dressing recipe in this book that calls for oil. This is the only time in the book that the word oil appears by itself. Americans at the turn of the century nourished themselves with butter, cream, egg yolks, and lard. They were not using vegetable oils. The presses for removing these oils from the seeds were only just invented at that time, and these oils hadn't made their way to the grocery stores in Monmouth, Illinois. In addition to eggs, butter, cream, lard, suet, which is beef fat, and other animal fats like chicken and duck fat, coconut meat and coconut oil supplied additional saturated fatty acids in turn of the century diets. Highly saturated coconut oil was used for crackers and baked goods. Now, the Baptists and their families were fond of rich desserts. Half the book is devoted to cakes, pies, ice cream, pudding, and donuts. And the donuts are fried in lard, of course. 2 advertisements for dentists at the back of the book testify to the effect of sugar and white flour on their teeth. But cancer and heart disease were extremely rare before the turn of the century. People were sturdy and strong, but obesity was not a problem. Today, however, we are being told that saturated fats from animal sources and from the tropical oils are the cause of cancer, heart disease, and obesity. Vegetable oils are being used as a substitute in everything from baked goods to baby food. So what we're going to do this evening is focus on how this change came about, how it was that Americans traded animal fats for vegetable oils. And the title of this tall tale is The Oiling of America.
Exactly.
Now let's move forward.
Exactly. And it is that. Anyway, we won't go any further with that. I've sort of made my point in that regard. But it basically, it's, just give me a sec. I would say to people, oops. Yeah, that's dropping into my ear. Wonderful. All I'll do is I'll cut that out, cut and paste. There's the link to that video. It goes on for 2 hours. So after this live stream, you can watch it, or tomorrow or whatever. Just grab the link, bookmark it, and please like it as well, and go through it and listen to it. Sally will give you a historical perspective of a lot of the things that have actually happened to our food supply, and some really great bits of wisdom from the society she represents, which is the Western A. Price Foundation. Anyway, we will move on. But I thought that, I needed to bring some of this stuff to attention, because there are people that are telling me that vegans are going, oh, we didn't eat, we ate like this and that. Show them that cookbook. If they argue with you that we ate differently 100 years ago, show them the cookbook. We didn't. We ate shitloads of animal foods. Everything was doused in animal fats. That's what you need to show them. Show them the cookbook. It's from the Baptist. This is on the internet. This is not on a carnivore site. This is on an internet archive site, an old book that basically shows exactly what these religious women were eating at the time within their community. This is what people were actually eating back then. This is not sort of some academic that said, oh, I think they were eating plants back then, which is a whole lot of bullshit. It's basically real people sharing their recipes and saying, this is what we ate. Mm-hmm. No bullshit, no lies, the truth. This is what we ate, how we ate it and stuff like that. And we need to basically push back on these fucking misanthropists and liars, because they keep lying. They keep telling people, no, we ate a whole lot of plants back then. It's only now we eat so much bloody meat. No, we eat 70% meat now. 70% plants now, and 30% things that could be construed as meat. In many cases, they have been modified in such devilish ways that most of it is not really animal foods. It's sort of this Frankenstein type animal food processed crap that they've filled with sugar and all sorts of other preservatives and emulsifiers, great for your gut, and all sorts of other crap. So it's a completely different thing. It's not basically pastured animal flesh that we consumed in large amounts in the past, and their byproducts. Yes, all that rape product that this mafia bloke here from Canada, trades in illegally and consumes continuously.
I've been fermenting it lately.
That white stuff, that liquidy white stuff.
Corinne's been making it into milk kefir for me lately, which I've been enjoying quite a lot.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been good.
Yes.
I'm actually out of milk at the moment. It's a sad story.
Oh, yeah. How devastating.
I can't get more until Wednesday, I think, probably.
Oh, God.
I have a
suffering?
No, I have a quart of milk kefir that I'm holding on to just in case.
Are you suffering?
When the withdrawals, the shakes get too bad.
The shakes.
That's not what most people mean when they say milkshakes.
You're getting a few of these ladies excited. Yes.
I hope so. I'm nothing if not exciting to the ladies, Harry.
Good to hear, mate. Good to hear. This is how far behind I am. T2. I'm desperately looking at your comments.
Just now he said milk the cat, so that's a good. I'll keep that in mind.
Did he? Yes, I'll come back to Tracy's. Where is it? Yep. That'd be a hard act, I can tell you.
You used to be able to buy a product in store. I think you can probably still get it at some places. It was made by Whiskas, the people who make the terrible cat kibble. Yeah, it's a cat kibble brand.
Yeah, they have it here as well.
Okay, yeah. They made one that was called cat milk, and it's meant to be like a milk beverage that's fortified with nutrients for cats. And my dad used to make that joke to the clerk when he would buy it, asking, like, do you think the cats struggle very much when they're being milked? And the clerks never reciprocated the humor.
God. Yeah, it's sort of bounced out of there. But in terms of L-citrulline, great for women as well. you guys have arteries as well, I suspect.
Ooh, I'm not. I wouldn't want to presume.
Yes. Yeah, could be hate speech nowadays, but got to be careful. About 10 minutes ago, you mentioned PUFA and membranes, lipids, and membrane stabilization. 2 questions, if I may. Milk from grass-fed cows usually contains more conjugated linoleic acid, yes, CLA, than milk from cows that have no access to pasture or green. Yep, that's true. And I suspect the 2 questions, if I may, you haven't really, I'm not sure exactly in which way you want me to explain it. It's basically in the cell membrane, you will find actually arachidonic acid and DHA get incorporated there. Because for both pro and anti-inflammatory and repair purposes, they are needed, and they also act as signaling molecules as well. Okay, at the cell membrane. So what the topopherols do is they have these long tails, and they basically can add an electron. So they can basically stabilize any PUFA that gets damaged. So if you're eating, let's say, a lot of sugar and you glycate or advance of glycation in products are circulating in your bloodstream, they can stick on these membranes and actually slightly rip off, or aldehydes can slightly rip off electrons, and so make them less stable. So that's where the PUFA comes, that's where the vitamin E comes in to stabilize by doing the electron doning. If you're also in a low carbohydrate state, which is another advantage, is you will have more glutathione, and that glutathione will replenish, will recycle, add an electron back to that to the vitamin E component, whatever the topopherol type is, length type or whatever. Okay, because it's there are different types. So that's, I'm hoping that that's what you really wanted to know.
Yeah. So his question further down, he builds off.
Okay. I'll go when I get to it, because there are others here as well. So
it's only about six comments below.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would this be a good example of animal PUFA? What is conjugate? Yeah. So, well, it's an omega-6. It's basically an animal type. It's an animal type. Look, it's differently structured compared to the sort of plant-based, derivatives. So what will come out of a plant has a different structure than what will come out of a sort of an animal sort of. I don't know whether I can actually see the CLA structure. Okay. Is it going to become? Hold on. I'll just save the image, because if I don't save it, it's not going to. Okay. Yeah, let me share that. So as you can see, there is the difference. So there is in its cyst form, there's in its trans form. So you can actually see the different structure, the way it is. It's on the reverse on the bottom part of the actual the bond. And so that's the sort of difference. It's a structural difference, and so it works differently in the body. So mechanistically, it actually can incorporate without creating any problems in the body in a much healthier way. This is much more, has, a much more greater vulnerability. So for the potential for rancidity, let alone the way it's processed, where here you've got far less in both cis and trans state. So that's sort of the structural differences. And so one, the body can recognize and use properly, and the other that gets turned in where that structure is actually damaged in the linoleic acid and becomes they actually put hydrogens there which are inappropriate. So they basically put it through a process which is an oil refinery that will hydrogenate these things. So when you add those extra hydrogens there, you actually prevent the ability for it to signal. And this is what happens to a trans fat that is basically being modified in a factory that no longer has the ability to signal. So when it actually gets incorporated into your membranes, it can't signal properly. So let's say you've got a lot of these trans fats incorporated. See, trans fats are quite stable. They don't oxidize like seed oils, like vegetable oils. So vegetable oils will become rancid and very, very pro-oxidants, very, increase the lipid peroxidation. The reason why they added all these things to trans fats that are derived from seed oils to create margarines and stuff like that is to make them more stable like saturated fats. So they wouldn't oxidize. So you could actually put them and use them as a margarine, as a butter replacement for the same length of time without it oxidizing. So trans fats actually are safer than, I know it sounds crazy, trans fat is safer from a vegetable oil than a seed oil that hasn't been fully hydrogenated, which is less stable, more rancid, more oxidative. It'll actually create more damage. It'll run through your bloodstream, through your body, and run riot, tearing electrons off like mad. Okay? So it'll do a lot of damage around the body. And that's why now we're shifting back away from trans fats back to these seed oils. It's not healthier, it's worse. Trans fats were bad, but now that they're removing the trans fats, they're putting in back just normal seed oils, and they're adding a bit more vitamin E to try and actually minimize the amount of rancidity and damage that these oils are creating in the new processed foods. So we haven't won anything. We've actually gone backwards in a sense. We're going to create far more damage in our system because of the rancidity. But there's a big problem with trans fats that have been modified in this way. The problem wasn't their stability. Their stability was great, that they weren't prone to oxidation. They were more stable like saturated fats. Their problem was their unnatural structure, because they added, in those two double bonds that I showed you, they added those hydrogens. What they did was they prevented them from signaling properly. Lipids between them have signaling properties as well. They signal between them. If you can't pass those electrical, signaling, because of those spikes that are preventing that, then it doesn't work properly. So it's sitting there, not functional. It's stable, but unfunctional. So if you've got a lot of these incorporated in your cells start not miscommunicating, not working properly. If they're not working properly and miscommunicating, they have the potential of basically, one, becoming very senescent or dying. The other, usually they just become senescent and less functional, and potentially can become cancerous as well. So that's where the danger comes from. So you can see there are two different types of sources of danger. I don't know whether I've explained it properly, but I hope I have. Where, you know, the one coming from animal products isn't a problem at all. You know, it's something that the body recognizes it can actually use and signals properly, and can be used for a whole lot of functions in the body, which you guys already know about because you've probably looked at conjugated linoleic acid anyway. So I don't really need to go into that.
So his second question, I don't think there was anything relevant commented in between, really, other than people praising Chris Nobby.
Yeah. I'm just cruise.
If there's a way to compensate, yeah.
Is there any way to compensate somehow for the lack of dystrophin in the case of muscular dystrophy, or somehow stabilizing cell? Okay, so look, when it comes to muscular dystrophy, it's no different than things like MS or any of these other sort of neurological diseases. I think that the best way is to be on an animal-based diet, but also to beef up the nutrition. So you need more organ meats. You need more phospholipids. So when we talk about phospholipids, we're talking about phosphatidylserine, choline. So we need all the precursors that basically help those along. You need a lot of the fat-soluble vitamins as well, you know, because they're very important as well for a number of reasons. You know, I could be sitting here for hours talking about them, but they play a lot of different roles. So all these things are important for good nutrition, plus the B vitamins, which are animal organ meats tend to be very good in B vitamins as well. So these are the sort of things you probably have to up. Like Terry Walsh did the same thing. She increased her intake of organ meats, you know, to improve her health, to get herself out of that, what was it called, a zero gravity seat, and get out there walking, get out there cycling and all that sort of stuff. So I would say what you need to do is get those things up and improve your mitochondrial health. And I know that I've promised a video on that, and it is coming. I just haven't completed the editing of it. So it will happen soon. So, and that's the other thing, that you need to improve your redox potential. You know, I've been talking about redox potential for some time. I've been talking about niacin, and I will discuss other things as well in regards to that and those sort of things. But really, the phospholipids are really important. So if you've got gut issues, consider a liposomal form. So on iHerb, there is a brand there, Aurora Nutrition, that I've talked about many times in all my live streams, and they have very good phospholipid type things. The other thing that I would basically definitely, out of all the antioxidants, I wouldn't bother with glutathione or any of this sort of stuff. I would get alpha lipoic acid, because it's so good at healing and it's a massive electron donor. So, currently there is poor science when it comes to all these diseases, unfortunately. The only thing that I can go on, I look at neurodegenerative diseases and also where genes are involved as well. And the only thing that I've actually seen that can actually silence genes and actually improve the functioning of people is phosphatidylserine. And that's from Israeli studies at Tel Aviv University. But they also do recommend choline and stuff like that. So my two things are phosphatidylserine, and choline. Add those in your diet pretty much as you can. Very important.
What was the first compound called again, Harry?
Phosphatidylserine.
Do you know how to spell that offhand?
Hold on. I will. Okay. Get a good brand. I've just basically, there it is. I've just put it in there. So it's called phosphatidylserine. It's sort of got a bit of a tongue twister. I tend to call it phosphatidylserine. I sort of have made it shorter. That's my branding. I'll put it that way. Yeah, I hate these. That's why I use a lot of acronyms, because I fucking hate trying to remember all these bloody words. There's so many. I just memorize them as acronyms, and that's why I use a lot of the acronyms. You've probably noticed, because trying to pronounce some of these are tongue twisters. So in that regard, and it doesn't mean you understand what you're talking about just because you can actually pronounce the damn thing. You can still use the acronyms and be well aware of what they do, so to speak. Yes. That's what happens to T1 and T2. They gag on that sort of stuff as well. They're already having a go at Shell. God, these nasties. Nasty. Yeah. You tell them, Shell. They need to. They're gagging on the stuff. It's annoying trolls. Not a problem, mate. Not a problem. Look, if send me an email and explain a bit better your conditions and stuff like that, and and I'll probably be able to give you a bit of a more comprehensive. It won't be immediate. I usually take my time because there's a lot of other people that are contacting me, but I will get some good information through to you and some good supplements that I think that are much better than some others in that regard. So, yep, not a problem. Here to help. Exactly. You tell T1, he's trying to feed you that awful stuff, isn't he? That awful, evil T1, that little damn frog, nasty little green frog. Yep, I know. Yes, I know you suffer. I know you suffer. I feel for you. Nope, it's definitely not. It's pretty much monounsaturated fat, pretty much. It's definitely not a seed oil. It's a fruit oil, like olive oil is a fruit derived from the fruit. A seed oil is derived from seeds, so definitely not. Yep, very rancid and very yucky. Is that a comment from UT1? Is that a personalized comment? Or is that your rancid foul mouth talking again? Yes. T1 needs definitely the Baptist for a whole lot of reasons. He's less than holy. Yes. Yes, probably needs a Baptist lady to give him a whack over his flaps or whatever they are. Yes, apparently they are, with all that good animal food, especially back then. Yep. They definitely put them through the ringer. They definitely put them through the ringer. Yes, they soaked them to death in lard and butter. You know, absolutely. Yes. Well, it varies, but people weren't dying from heart attack. They weren't dying from basically cancer. They weren't dying from the modern diseases. But you have to remember, back then, there were no antibiotics. Antibiotics were developed by Fleming in the war years. So they didn't exist back then. Most, when it came to the quality of, indoor plumbing, just general sanitation was pretty piss poor back then. So you had poor sanitation, no antibiotics. So if you got a bacterial infection, you're dead. That's why they used to chop the limbs off soldiers.
For gangrene, yep.
Exactly, because there was no other solution. You were either dead or you were a cripple. Take your choice. And also, they didn't have any, vaccinations. So basically, you died from a number of colourful diseases, TB, polio, take your pick. So, yes, so when you're basically living in, and also remember, a lot of people, poorer people, there were much more poorer people back then. A lot of them actually didn't die from overeating like today. They died from poor malnutrition as well. So infant mortality was very high, again, due to antibiotics, lack of antibiotics, and due to infections. We had a high infection rates, and there was massive amounts, and in particular because a lot of doctors were ignorant about the reality that, going and actually dealing with a cadaver and actually ending up with a whole lot of bacteria on your hands could potentially give the women that you were dealing with also that bacteria and kill them. And so people were dying, kids were dying, because of this high infant mortality. So if you really want to look at I have to find the link somewhere. There's a guy that actually did this and pulled out all the infant mortality data, and there's not much difference in terms of the sort of when you look at life expectancies. They sort of tend to go through this U-type curve, and it's much flatter between the generations. It's only when you add in the infant mortality, the war years and stuff like that. So when you adjust for war years, infant mortality, and all these other things, I mean, remember, up until the Second World War, we were still butchering ourselves like there was no tomorrow. There was every couple of years. I mean, we've lived in a period since the Second World War of uninterrupted peace. We're talking about now, 70 plus years. 75 years we've lived in uninterrupted. That's 2 generations, completely uninterrupted. So more people are alive because they're not being bombed or killed in millions of numbers anymore. So when you take all those numbers out, the figures look very different. This is why the problem with lifespan is it's so confounded, it's irrelevant. People, what diseases were they dying from back then? We know what the disease because the doctors recorded them. They recorded the early cardiovascular diseases. They knew that most of the other deaths were due to rheumatic fever because there was no damage in. It's not as if they didn't know. I mean, back in the early part of the 20th century, they actually had looked at mummies from, and this is pre-World War I, that actually looked at mummies, and they'd actually seen that they had actually arterial calcification in their arteries. So they knew that they had, and also the way people had described heart attacks and stuff like that. So they were aware of this. It wasn't that they weren't aware of it, but it was very uncommon back then. That's the difference. So when we're talking about major, I mean, now we're told to expect in the US, as an example, 1 in 3 will have a cancer in their life.
Yep.
1 in 3. We're talking about, you know, over 100 million people.
I've even heard it fatalistically stated that if you live long enough, cancer will get you eventually.
That's nonsense. That's nonsense. I mean, my great-grandfather lived to 107, and many others, Okinawans and all that, they die from natural causes, you know, just no more telomere and no more cell division and just drop dead. Too much cells and can no longer function, organs start failing, and you drop dead. And that's the natural way. Mm-hmm. You've outlived your genetic lifespan. But these people are not dying from outliving their genetic lifespan. They basically have major cellular damage, and they are suffering due to major cellular damage. Simple as that. You know, so there's a complete difference. And I say to people, you know, if you want good health, I mean, I did in January my scan, and pretty much I had no scarring. You know, if you've got lesions in your heart and you've got basically, you know, this sort of, what happens is you get all this sort of fibrotic, this sort of collagen type material that actually builds up and it grows those walls. If you're scarring those walls and growing them in your arteries, well, you're doing something wrong. I was for many years, and it was called seed oils. Quite a bit of sugar as well, but mainly seed oils. So I stopped that for the last decade, and it's made a big difference. It's sent my scarring down to about 0. That's really important. Mm-hmm. You know, I've got my proper functioning heart back again. So it takes a while. It's not quick. You know, if anybody wants a quick solution, it's not going to happen. You know, there are some surgical interventions you could potentially use. I don't know enough about the risks. I know that they exist. If somebody wants to ask me, you know, what are the interventions other than bypass surgery, I can tell you. There are 2 methods that are sort of cutting edge methods. But at the same time, you know, there's the old method, opening you up and pulling your heart out and doing bypass surgery to it. And there's basically fixing up your diet and over a certain period of time, and increasing your fat soluble vitamins as well, in particular MK4. So, yeah. Anyway, where was I? Yeah. I actually subscribe to Townsend. Yeah, he's pretty good. He's got a lot of those old recipes and old sort of, you know, and insights into how people ate back then. Yep. So yeah, I know what you mean. Very important to look in the past and look at what is our physiology. You know, the thing that I go is, let's say we can discard all this, the whole lot. The last 200-300 years, we can say all this is nonsense, means nothing. Fine. What does the N15 data tell us? The archaeological evidence. For all the hominins, that means including Homo sapiens for the last 350,000 years, for all the hominins, what is the common thing? The common theme is that the N15 nitrogen isotope in concentration in our collagen, in our bones, in our teeth, is that of a super or hyper carnivore. It's indisputable. You know, it's evidence. It's every single friggin' bone you grab from archaeological evidence, pre-agriculture, and look at it, it's got very high levels of N15. The N15 data does not lie. You can't have every single fucking bone on this planet from different hominins telling you the same thing and basically saying it's not true. You're basically deluding yourself. You're crazy, you know, and saying that some modern fuckwit can tell you, oh, this is what humans ate. Where's your fucking proof? Cockwomble. Where's your fucking proof? You know, these guys are cockwombles. You know, Bart's right. I love cockwomble. Cockwomble, cockwomble, cockwomble. Anyway, I'm getting too excited. Yeah, so
I've got another 10 minutes in me probably here.
Oh, I'm not entertaining enough for you, mate. Shit.
No, I got here earlier so that I can still put in a good 90 minutes on the stream.
Yes, I'm unforgivable. Where am I? I'm losing myself. Cookbook. Hey, school in 19. Originally printed in 1895. There are pure ingredients. Yep. Organ, offal. Yep, exactly. Most Europeans consumed. It's cheap and plentiful available. Why throw it out? People didn't throw things out in those days. I mean, we live in the land of plenty now, and we just discard things like there's no tomorrow. But back then, people basically were undernourished. Everything was eaten. And actually, the undernourishment was a good thing because they were, to some extent, intermittent fasting. So they were clearing out some cellular debris, which is a good thing as well. So, you know, it's not all just the diet in that regard. Putting too much down your mouth continuously, not a good thing. Yeah, thanks, Bo, for that. Yep, exactly. Japan, they consume shitloads of fish. You know, they literally trawl the entire planet to, you know, and consume. But actually, the people that live the longest are the Okinawans, the old Okinawans, and they didn't consume a lot of fish. They pretty much consumed more pork. Yep. Sardinians, more pork. So obviously, if you were to separate the Okinawans and the Sardinians out of Sardinia, out of Italy, as an example, because the Italians basically bring the average down, the other Italians that are on the mainland that are consuming olive oil, then the problem is even that olive oil is not as good as it used to be. Let's put it that way. It is diluted with some seed oils, especially in recent times, and especially from the parts of the South, which, you know, let's say there are criminal organizations that are a bit involved in that part of the trade as well. So, yes. I have butter with my butter. That's a double dose. You're double dosing. God, woman, you can't double dose. Keep up, Shell. That's a good one. Yep. And copper is important. And if you basically, zinc is important, but also copper. Liver has good quantities of copper. So there you go. A lot of the seafood, crustaceans like mussels, have good levels of copper as well. Copper to zinc ratio are very good in octopus and squid. And in gelatine, which is bovine gelatin, you can actually get that and incorporate it in your soups and stuff like that. And bovine gelatin is extremely high in copper and very low in zinc. So you can get bovine gelatin, put it into a broth, and basically balance out your stuff. And that's what I do. I actually buy gelatin. I buy bovine gelatin for that purpose because it's easier. You know, rather than actually buying crustaceans every bloody day, or, you know, because it's more the nose to, it's basically the nose to tail approach rather than actually using. But, you know, some people, for whatever reason, don't want the gelatin, and say, oh, yeah, I'll have some crustaceans. Fine. Or I'll have squid. And I occasionally, it's just sometimes it's really hard for people to get access to squid or octopus in some parts of the world. So the other option is gelatin from, bovine gelatin. Perfect for copper. So, yeah, throw it in a nice meat soup, something like that. Yep. I sort of mentioned that. But in the mountainous regions, they used to use more lard in the past, like the Greeks in the mountainous regions where the majority of people, because Italy's very mountainous as well, like Greece. We don't have big open lands for, grain agriculture or stuff like that, or even seed oils, So, and olive oil was the only other access, and that was used primarily for lighting in ancient times. So throughout the whole Middle East, I'm trying to remember the population. They started with an M. If anybody can remember, there is in the Middle East, which is the northern part of Syria, there was an old early civilization, and the name started with an M, and I can't remember it.
Mesopotamia?
No, not Mesopotamia. That was further down. That's Mesopotamia is basically where Baghdad is and stuff like that. That's that
right.
part. Okay, we're talking about this is the northern part or the central northern part of Syria. Okay. There was it's a small name. It starts with M. I think M-A. I just can't remember. Just won't come to my head at the moment. But they were the first to use olive oil for lighting. And from there it spread through, because this was in the I can't remember which part of the Neolithic period that they had actually developed this. And then after that, it's sort of within the Bronze Age. It's sort of before the Bronze Age, it sort of spread through the Middle East and the Anatolia and into parts of Europe as well as lighting, and particularly in Greece. That's why olive oil was, the olive oil trees are pretty much Italy, Greece, and, all the Mediterranean are, full of olive oil or trees of olive oil. Further north, because it's too cold, you don't get olive trees. And they do well in sort of sandy, very rough terrain, so to speak. But it was primarily used for those purposes. It was not used as a cooking medium. Animal fat was used for cooking because it was more plentiful back then. We've just changed the situation now, but back then it was quite plentiful. Exactly. They eat. I mean, antipasta is basically cured meats. That's how they start. They eat a whole lot of cured meats, which is a whole lot of protein, fills you up. And then you have a small little bowl of pasta, which is like sort of the icing on the cake type thing. That's all it is. And remember, these people, it's a bit like the Asians that used to have a small bit. Even my mother used to give me like a cup, one single cup of rice, as an example, with a whole lot of, minced meat on top. That was like a meal. You didn't eat massive amounts. And the other thing is, back then you were very physically active as well. People physically working. So you depleted your glycogen. And so that small amount of pasta or that small amount of rice wasn't an issue. You go and see the Southeast Asians now that are eating much bigger, large bowls of pasta and are more sedentary and working in offices. They're all getting diabetic at greater rates than what Americans are. So not working for them now, is it? So there are lifestyle issues as well associated with all this. So we need to take that into consideration, why in the past certain lifestyles allowed for some. It's a bit like bodybuilders. They could actually have a lot of like shitloads of like, I recommend like carbohydrates and stuff like that. And a lot of that gets put into glycogen. So, yeah, there's that part as well. So just keep that in mind. Things have to be nuanced. Yes, that's why people used to cook them back then, and used to soak them, cook them. They used to do all that to soften them. That's the whole reason why you do that, both for the anti-nutrients, but also for those little hooks that are in the fibrous material, plus the oxalates and everything else that's in there as well. Because remember, in the actual fibers as well, they are very oxalate rich as well. And remember, people in the past consumed a lot of dairy products, a lot of cheeses, a lot of butter, a lot of that. What does these dairy products, this high level of calcium, do? This high level of calcium binds oxalate. Foods, organ meats, but also things like onions and stuff like that are very high in sulfur. What do? They also deal with the effects, the negative effects, the desulfonation that actually happens. And remember, your glycocalyx, your little hairline structures that are around, or the pericellular matrix, the little hairline structures that are around your bacteria, all your everything in your body. What does that do? Well, that basically prevents things from becoming sticky, as I've been telling you for ages. Things don't stick because negative charge, they bounce off each other. So that's important in that regard. The other thing is, the certain level of saturated fats are very important as well, especially with bacteria in the gut. I know saturated fats get a lot of bullshit and all that, but if you look at LPS, lipopolysaccharides, that everybody, first of all, you have to be on a plant-based diet to basically to have more of those bacteria, the gram-negative type bacteria anyway, because on an animal-based diet, they usually diminish in amounts. But beyond that, it also plays an important role. That LPS, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, plays an important role in creating a negative charge on the outside, so those fucking bacteria don't become sticky. You don't want them being sticking all over, your different membranes and your gut lining and stuff like that and burrowing in. You want them to bounce off. You don't want them burrowing in and stuff like that, So, when you basically give them PUFA, you damage that component. That's what knocks it out. Saturated fat doesn't. Actually, saturated fat reduces the damage, the risk that you would have from LPS. And there's plenty of studies to show that. Yeah, it isn't. It definitely isn't. It's when you cook basically at high temperature. When you cook any fat or oil, you will create a certain level of aldehydes. And we know aldehydes are very damaging to the body. They will rip cell membranes. They will do a lot of damage to cell membranes around the body. So what is the highest, it's obviously the seed oils. They are highest in these things. In particular, also the omega-3s, like fish oil tablets, are very high in aldehydes. So do not buy them. Where this type of product, this cod liver oil, is a much more stable. It's traditionally done. It doesn't have these aldehyde issues. So all food has a bit of aldehyde. You can't get away from aldehyde. The question is, do you have small amounts that the body can deal with, or do you have massive amounts which just overwhelms all your systems and does a lot of rancid damage all over the place? That's the difference. Where, yes, cooking, when it comes to cooking, lard is best. Lard produces the lowest and least amount of aldehydes. That's why I love pork. because I know I can cook pork right through, which you have to, for a lot of the parasites that exist. And I don't have to worry about the fats of pork because I know it will produce the least amount of aldehydes. Butter is, and tallow is again very close to pork, but just slightly produces slightly a bit more, but very little, not much. So it's still quite good in that regard. Butter is a bit more sensitive, so that's why the subcontinent Indians went to ghee for a number of reasons, plus for the high smoking point. So ghee produces less, butter produces more. It's because of the damaging effects to the proteins and the glucose, the little amount of glucose and protein that's in the butter. That's what gets damaged and glycated. And that's where the aldehydes are slightly higher from butter compared to ghee. So if you basically want to put you've cooked food and you throw a whole lot of butter on top, which is nice, or you cook things at a lower temperature, butter. But if you want to cook something at a slightly higher temperature, use ghee or lard. In particular, lard is even better because it's even got less aldehydes. So that's the thing. Olive oil has substantially like a 2+, I can't remember whether it's a 2-fold or 2.5-fold to animal fats. So it produces far more damage. So it's not, if you want to use it as a salad dressing, if you're into that sort of, if you're still eating that sort of shit, fine, use olive oil. It's probably the safest. But you could also do the thing that Sally said. You could melt butter and put butter on top like they used to in the past on their salads and stuff like that as a dressing, creating a dressing. So you can basically put into a little container melted butter. You can add a bit of vinegar and shake it and create this sort of creamy vinegar dressing. Done. So that's another option. So you don't have to use olive oil. You can create a butter, vinegar, vinaigrette type, dressing for easy. I do it sometimes. Yep. Yeah. Look, a bit of wine vinegar, and so I get some Greek wine vinegar and I'll put it in with butter and mix it really hard, and it becomes a really nice. And I just put it on top of my steak. Beautiful.
Luke's just posted his weekly stream meme.
Thanks, Luke. Is it insulting enough? Oh,
no, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Oh, it's perfect. It is perfect. That's a good one. I love that. Nice one, Lucas. Turn off. Cyberpunk 2077. Great. Nice one. Love it. Yeah, even the hand there, mate, the cybernetic hand, and perfect. Actually, the outfit, I can't remember the movie. There's a movie. Was it actually called Cyberpunk? Or I'm not sure. Can't remember now.
I don't know. That's he's photoshopping the cover of the.
It just seems very. It seems very familiar
up.
that the sort of outfit or whatever has come out of a movie or some sort. I've watched plenty of sci-fi stuff. I can't remember now. Nice one.
Yep, that's pretty good.
Turn it off. Okay, thanks, Lucas. Good one, mate.
I think I'll take that note to say goodnight for the week, Harry.
You can take your sorry punk ass out of here. Hey, thanks, mate. Appreciate you turning up.
Good. Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
I'll be back. Mate.
Something, Sarah Connor.
No. Before. What do we say? I'll be
Beethoven.
I'll be back. We're waiting for it, mate. You'll be back next week.
I'll be back.
Perfect. Thanks, mate. I appreciate you turning up. Yes, always entertaining to have you around, and I hope you enjoy my crude humor now and then.
Always.
I try
to.
to.
What do you mean now and then? It's constant.
That's true. That's true. I can't help myself.
No, I was glad to make it earlier in the stream so that I'm less dead on my feet toward the end. The later the evening gets, the dumber I get in terms of my ability to find words to articulate myself.
Some of these characters here really like that as well. I know, yeah. They have issues, unfortunately. I realise that. I struggle with them myself. Yeah.
All right. I'll see you next week, Harry.
See you, mate. Take care.
Take care, everyone.
Bye. Well, back to me. Back to colourful Harry. Search for the word oil in my old cook. Yeah, look, it's very, very rare because it wasn't used. I mean, the only people that actually, it was the rich Romans that actually consumed some of this type of oil. It was very hard to actually produce. It just wasn't possible. Yep. Exactly, T1. Exactly. Yeah, look, it's the same thing up in parts of Scandinavia as well. You know, God, it's just so dangerous for those populations in particular because, one, they don't have enough solar radiation to deplete deuterium, and they're adding too much deuterium into their diet. And two, they'll be actually eating a lot of fake stuff as well, and that means they'll be putting far more crap into them. I actually was watching yesterday the what was it? One of the subs, the German subs, U-38, I think it was. It's one of the U-212, their latest type of stealthy subs, and they were literally going out and they were handing out. They were putting all this food in. You should have seen the amount of food. It was just ridiculous, and it was all, a lot of this, there was, they had some beer, good on them, but they also had a lot of this processed stuff. And I'm going, God, the amount of seed oils people are consuming nowadays, not very healthy. So, yeah, and unfortunately, they had good traditions. Germans had, especially if you go what they call, in a derogatory name, they call the East Germans, they call them Aussies. I know, yeah, we call ourselves Aussies, and people get completely fucking confused when you use the word Aussie because it means but Oz, not Aussie, like we, pronunciation. Yep, bit lost, but they still have their traditions far more. The East Germans, so they still eat pork far more than beef. They also still eat a lot of those traditional German foods and less processed. I mean, now it's sort of, in the last couple of years, they've sort of, a lot of the West German processed food has sort of moved into the eastern part of the country, and sort of they're going to hell in a handbasket like the rest of us, health-wise, unfortunately. But some are holding on to those traditions, which is good, because we need to maintain those traditions. They're so important for the health of people, because those traditions can come back. If I always say, if there's something positive that came out of Eastern Europe, it was basically holding on to a lot of old traditions. That's one good thing, and some good science that was actually done. So, but unfortunately, a lot of these countries now are being the food industry and the big pharma are literally just plowing into these countries and trying to basically change the laws and legislation in these countries to basically change the food guidelines, what they eat and stuff like that. There is a bit of a pushback in Hungary, which is good. The Hungarians are saying fuck you and are basically sticking to their guns and their traditions, and so good for them. But some of the other countries are sort of being pressured by US business interests and the local political party officers of the US empire, and they tend to go around telling them they should be eating kibble. So yeah, exactly. Why are diplomats basically representing the food industry and telling people to eat kibble is beyond me. Why they're interfering in these countries, their food policies and all that. You're there as a diplomat. You're not there basically to interfere and tell them what to eat and stuff like that. These is what some of these people are doing, or getting involved in some of the politics over there. Even like the ambassador to Greece, the previous ambassador to Greece was, and even the current one was very heavily involved in the politics within the Greek Orthodox Church. They got no fucking right getting involved in my church, And people wonder why people in Greece get pissed off with the US. When you interfere in our church, in our faith, you've basically crossed a line. That's wrong. And that's why people get pissed off. People like, Bobby as well. He's aware of this sort of stuff because he's seen it and he knows some of this politics that is involved in the church, and it's wrong. And it pisses me off as well. As you know, when it comes to the American people, I have plenty of American friends and have, this is nothing to do with the American people. When I criticize governments and elites of these countries, no different than you guys criticize your own elites, So you know what I'm talking about. These sort of nasty people that don't give a shit about any population, let alone the American population. They want to make the rest of the world sick, just as they've made the American population and profit through their misery, from their misery. So that's what's happening, and it's bloody annoying in that regard. But it really pisses me off, in particular, not only the food stuff, but when it comes to the religious side, especially when they have the arrogance to talk about religious freedom. You got politicians in America jumping up and down about political religious freedom, and then they go and interfere in other countries' religious affairs and try and actually manipulate things. That's wrong. Fucking stay out of people's religion. Listen to your own laws that you say you subscribe to freedom of religion and the defense and respect of religious freedom. Well, why are you interfering then in Greek Orthodox religious matters? So I just wanted to say that. But anyway, it's not part of my show. It's about health, but it's something that irritates me. Let's put it that way. Sorry for the rant. Thanks, mate. I don't know what that was for. It was for something. Do you like me abusing you? Okay, must be. I'll put it down to that. Yes, they are. They are. Good for them, Greeks as well. They've lost it a bit in the recent years, unfortunately. We used to be a much more bigger meat-eating and dairy consuming population. We're still pretty good. We still rank number 2 in milk consumption in actual Europe. So we're still number 2. The Swiss are number 1 in milk consumption, but I think there's a couple of years there that we actually outranked even the Swiss. So it sort of goes back and forward. The last one, the 2017 data that I showed in one of my videos, one of my chats with Bart, that was basically when we were number 2. But we're bouncing. A lot of these other countries now are getting access to more meat, like in like some of the countries in the Balkans, and they are really close to us. So the differences between some of these Balkan countries, Greece and Switzerland, are really becoming very close. And again, these Eastern European countries, they know nutrition. If they can get access now that they've got a bit more money, they go into some good nutrition. But unfortunately, we've got a bit of interference by certain people that I mentioned earlier that are basically trying to change the food culture of these countries to the detriment of these populations. And it is very annoying when they should be diplomats and not be involved in food politics. They're not there to do that sort of stuff. Harry talks about this happening in Greece during the time. I saw a change in olive oil usage after the Axis pulled out of that area. Yep, exactly. It did. After the Second World War, due to the Marshall Plan, production of olive oil went through the roof. So, a lot of farmers back then, and a lot of people, they had massive loss of animals because they were confiscated by the occupation authorities. So olive trees were a quick source of energy, So on the islands, you could grow olive trees, like Milos, where my younger sister comes from. They grew them. But on other parts of the country where it was really just not feasible, they didn't. But it took them a while, many years, as my father told me, many years for, where they were buying stuff because they had very little access to animal products sufficient. The country was devastated, let alone from death and starvation. Something like 600,000 people died. As many soldiers as the US lost in the Second World War, Greece lost as population. Yes, very devastating for a population. It was 10% of the population, so had about 6 million at the time. So that was a horrendous loss. It's like a little genocide. So yes. So Greeks, when they could actually produce more meat and stuff like that, they did, and they went to town with it. Yes, and I know because I lived through that food culture in the 70s and the early 80s in Greece. And then steadily after that, like the rest of the world, it started being destroyed. Very annoyingly because of the food guidelines. Yep, 40s, 50s chef friend suggested to me the amount of butter in recipes, half a stick. Yep, exactly. Look, people just used so much butter back then. I love butter. I have to say, I love butter. And I don't care what butter it is, whether it's from goat, lamb, or cow's butter. Any source of butter is just cream. The creaminess is just I can't get enough of I love cream. It's one of my. $400Ks. Not sure about that. You mean people lost? Well, that's what the Greeks dispute that figure. They say it's much higher, that it was 600,000. Some people say it's 400,000. Some people say it's 300,000. There are different official figures out there. But if you add the calamities of the Second World War and the Civil War right after, because it was a continuation of the war, and that was the British coming in supporting the Royalists and turning after they had an agreement. Greece could have ended up as a sort of a more independent country with a sort of a left-right sort of government, which are sort of a more centrist, which eventually that's what happened. In the 60s, we ended up with a more centrist government anyway, So, and the centrist, the guy that actually was George Papandreou, he basically would have ended up as prime minister anyway from that agreement. So the country didn't have to go through that massive civil war and so many people killed and so much hatred being created for a number of generations, which was so painful for the Greek people. Even today, people don't want to talk about those years. They're so painful because family members killed family members. It was a very brutal period. So, something which we are very unhappy about because other forces came in and deliberately. It was, the British came in and rearmed the actual traitors that had actually collaborated with the Germans. They gave them weapons, as an anti-communist thing. But at the time, the communists had signed the agreement. They were willing to actually be part of as a minority force within a new government that was being headed by a centrist who had come in with the British anyway. So it wasn't as if they were basically going to alter things, but they just wanted to basically eliminate that opponent completely. That's why they started the Civil War, so many people didn't have to die. Let's put it that way. Always a solution, kill. Seems a simple solution. Have recommended electrolyte supplements. I'm trying to keep my mum eat a low carb diet since she was type 2 and drinks sparkling wine is through good enough. No, look, drop me a line. I've actually discussed this in previous stuff about the homeostasis of electrolytes. Really important. So if your potassium and magnesium are lower, naturally your body will adjust the sodium levels and the calcium levels. All these things get adjusted. So if you're higher, so the biggest problem is when people usually have high retentiveness. So you're coming off a high carbohydrate diet, she will probably still have some level of insulin resistance, which means that any potassium or that's in there, any magnesium will still be in there. It's only when you drop your insulin, when eventually you become non-diabetic and your insulin drops, that is when, if you don't have enough sodium in there to hold on to those other electrolytes, they start dumping until there's a homeostasis of the sodium potassium channels, the sort of membrane there, the potential, what they call the gradient potential. But anyway, it's just basically that fluids basically have to be balanced between the inside and outside the actual cells and your blood vessels. Just think of it, it's like two balloons with a connection, and basically the water will basically balance. The same thing with these sort of electrolytes. So if you don't have, you'll dump more and you'll feel a bit, the keto flu. So I always say to people, up your potassium, up your magnesium in a short-term period, then you'll get enough from your diet, and then up your also your levels of sodium. They will balance each other out. But if you do that in a state where people have still got very high, insulin, it hasn't come down. So that's why you have to sort of keep an eye on these things. Then what you can actually happen is you can actually bloat up. You can actually hold too much fluids from the sodium. So, and you don't want that either. So it's a matter of managing that gradually and looking at how much can you take and how much not, and slowly balance those as you're transitioning. And that's why it's probably better not to go to a carnivore diet, but to basically go from a SAD diet to a low carb diet, which still has a bit of things like pumpkin, a bit of these sort of things, because what they do is they still keep insulin slightly up, and you can actually just slowly transition, and that's what you want. Don't rush your mum, just transition her slowly over time. It's not a marathon. It's not a race. Consider it like a long marathon. It takes time to transition. So yes, be sensible about it. But if you want some finer tips, drop me a line and I'll give you some information. Okay. and just go to the About, and you'll find the email address there. I know what your sick mind is thinking. I know what your sick mind is thinking. I know the sort of cream you're thinking. You sick little puppy. It is a bit of a whipping, Shell. God almighty. Ugh. Damn troll. He's a sick puppy, isn't he, Luke? The Brits screwed me, did they now? That's awful. It would have been painful. Promised everything to everyone, made promises to the Jews, to the Arabs. Yeah, it's called divide and rule, divide and conquer. Look at the India and Pakistan. Yep. Over the poles. Yeah, well, it's a bit of fun, divide and rule. Roman, they were actually taught by the best in this was the Roman Empire. They patented this method for the rest of us, so to speak. Look, the elites of Britain, yes, not the British people. British people were just cannon fodder like the American people are today for the American Empire. We've always been pretty close to the British people from antiquity, the Greeks. We traded with them. We had close contacts with them. Poseidon, one of our gods, was meant to have gone there and considered them a friendly people to the Greeks. So we've had a very close relationship. When we liberated ourselves, a lot of Greeks, a lot of British people came over and fought with the Greeks to liberate us from the Turks. Not many, but we had substantial things. People like Byron and many others, many notable people came over and fought with us. So we, there was a down in the southern part of the Peloponnese. It's called close to Pylos. There was a sort of a naval war there where the British and French intervened to support the Greek navy, and we decimated the Ottoman basically navy at the time, and that guaranteed our freedom to a large extent because it made it much easier to the lands that had been liberated to basically then make them governable, so to speak, to be able to set up a government to really stabilize the situation. So it was an important assistance. So I don't begrudge them for helping. We helped them in North Africa. We sent troops. There are many people, even in Australia, that fought in the Greek squadrons of the RAF. And I actually knew one. He passed away a couple of years back. Good friend of my family. So it's never been the people. We've been very close, and it's basically been the elites that have screwed us, that have caused a lot of this misery. That's the problem. I mean, let's not forget that India was ruled by a whole lot of elites there that were those royalist elites that were in bed with the British Empire. So it wasn't, you can't really rule a place unless you have local sympathizers, local collaborators, so to speak. So there is that as well. So we need to be realistic. But my sort of thing is that it was a very painful episode, and it's sort of in regards to, I don't really talk about it because a lot of Greeks don't like talking about it in that regard, but it was one of those painful episodes that are part of that history. Look, Alexander, he was quite ruthless when he went east. So it may have been justifiable initially to take on the Persian Empire, since they'd attacked us twice and caused devastation in the Greek world. So we were more than justified taking military action against them. But at the same time, he went beyond. He started going into the sort of other areas which were outside that sort of initial area of conquest. And that's why a lot of his soldiers were dissatisfied and started rebelling against him, saying, well, this wasn't part of the plan. It was a plan to basically deal with the foe, the Greek foe, and then basically go back home. You're basically going on a conquest of the whole world. So, yes, and then he invaded India, northern India, and forced one Taxila to basically collaborate, and then, moved against another one that basically along the Hydaspes River, and he defeated him by deception, and then basically moved his forces further east, and he was confronting. That's when he forced the unification of a lot of the kingdoms. They unified and brought in a military force of 10 times his force, and he was so fucking arrogant he wanted to take them on as well. And his soldiers at the time, his officers at the time said, no fucking way, you're fucking crazy. We've taken on, I mean, at the time, the highest amount that they'd taken on was 5 times, 10 times, and 5 times they were very lucky to just get out of it alive by taking on 5 times the forces. 10 times was just madness, But Alexander, he thought he could do anything, so he never lost a battle. That was his biggest problem. So he, so we have a few characters like that in our own history, that, let's say, loved a bit of battle and stuff like that. So, I mean, I'm not claiming any superiority in that regard. That's what I'm trying to say. But yes, it's a lot of these things, usually kings and emperors and people like that, and the rest of us are cannon fodder, put to kill each other, basically, and they usually take the majority of the spoils. Yes, most people take their sorry asses back to their homeland in a wretched state, in many cases, damaged in one way psychologically or physically. Yes, wonderful. What we do to ourselves sometimes. Anyway, let's move on. Probably the stuff that I didn't really want to get into. Oops. See you, Luke, and thanks for that. Thanks for that other stuff as well. I appreciate it in that regard. Yes. Sorry for the other rants. I didn't really want to get into politics. That's not the theme of this. So, anyway, any other questions, guys, on not politics, please? Just on food-related issues and stuff like that. If we can just focus on those things. What's this one? German does have absolute compulsory state-run education. Yep, so does Greece. Yeah, so it's no different. Greece has as well, in that regard. That's what's I actually. Look, they do in some countries, but really a lot of this sort of vegan sort of stuff is really happening in places like some of the Scandinavian countries. It's not happening in Greece, I can tell you. It's not happening in Greece. It's not happening. It really has to. It doesn't really matter, because even in Australia, where we have private education, it's still happening here. It's not because of the state-run education system. It's just basically that these people within certain societies have been able to infiltrate the education system, the education unions, the education sort of establishment, and push these policies. We're in Greece because Greek Orthodox Church, 95 plus 97% of people are Greek Orthodox. Well, they're not going to put up with this shit. Simple as that. They're going to say, fuck off, And recently, I can't remember which other country just recently. Was it Poland? I can't remember. I think it may have been Poland. They withdrew from some UN body. My friend told me yesterday. I fucking forgot. Some UN body, which basically which has to do with education, to try to force all this sort of multiple sex, all these different crazy sort of modern stays. And as the majority of us would understand, is in nature there are only two sexes. One is called a female, one is called a male. That's all that exists. You look at any other animal in nature, that's all that exists. One is humping the other mostly, So that's all that exists. Now, even the ones that, because there is even some homosexuality in nature, and some will hump others, but that's all there is, So it's limited to that sort of stuff in nature. You won't see any other sort of stuff. This sort of bizarre sort of stuff, 21st century nonsense that's actually appeared is just nonsense. And, they've pretty much pulled away and said, and basically good for them, because Greece has a public education system and they've told them, and again, Poland also has a public education system and they've told them a state-based one. So nothing to do with state, don't confuse the issue, because that just creates stupid side politics, left and right side politics. That's not what it is. It's basically this nonsense of people pushing forward non-biology. You're either male or female, period. It's biology, it's science, Now, how you feel, what sort of emotional wreck you are due to your diet, lifestyle, or whatever, or association, that's a different issue altogether. If you want to consider yourself basically a pit bull terrier, and there are crazies out there that basically paint themselves in like animal sort of things, or actually even go and actually have implants to look like cats or dogs or whatever. People that do this, that have got psychological issues. I have no problem if they want to express themselves in that crazy way. I have an issue when they're trying to force it on to the 99% of the population that basically doesn't subscribe to that shit. Because these people say, oh, you are, so it's okay if we discriminate against the 99% and force their lifestyle down our throats, but they don't like us forcing our lifestyle down our throats as a majority. You can't have it both ways. I don't believe that we should be telling them how to live their lives, but they shouldn't be telling us, the majority, how to live our life. You can't have it both ways. These people want to have it both ways, and that is where they are wrong. But nothing to do with the education system. Let's not confuse things and create misdirects, because when you start, it's a different, if you want to talk about state-based or government-based or non-government-based schooling and all that, that's a completely different conversation. When you're talking about this craziness that's out there, what they're trying to push and all that, that's a different issue. And that's where we need to fight back with science and say, that's not what science tells us. Science tells us there are two sexes. There may be some psychological differences in types of psychological expression or behavior characteristics within those sexes. That's true. Much less pronounced in the past, more pronounced today. Why? I suspect it's the food culture and other bits of the culture, but that is to be researched. It hasn't been proven empirically in any way. We haven't done any science because nobody wants to do the science, or everybody fears to do the science. Let's put it that way. They are too fucking scared to do the science. Professor Peterson has learnt in the hard way, so, and that's the thing, that's the unfortunate reality of things. But we need to not conflate things with other issues, and focus on the real issues, so I tend to basically believe in a single education system, but with some level of independence and less interference from government, but a state-based type thing where it's administered by the principal of the school, not by the bureaucracy. So the bureaucracy just sets out the educational documents and all that as something to base, but then the actual teachers and the administrators are the ones that administer at the local level. So it's a more autonomous sort of thing, like you see in some parts of the world, and it actually works much better. The academic performance is much higher. You know, in Greece, I can tell you, when I went there, it was swim or sink, and you'd be left back a year. So you pushed yourself to perform, so you wouldn't be left behind. There's no levels. There's just one fucking level, and either you perform or you don't. Simple as that. So there's no soft cock. And the state schools there are actually even stricter than the private schools in Australia, because I lived through them, and they even caned back then, So they were in the 70s. They were fucking tough as nails, and still are quite, compared to many other countries. And that's why they get good academic performance. So, now with the crisis, things have gone to shit, but that's a different issue altogether, because money isn't being put into education. It's not being put anywhere, so all they're doing is just paying their creditors. But that's a different issue altogether. But the time when I was there, no levels, just one level. And they are 2 years ahead of Australia in terms of education. That means the stuff that they do is 2 years ahead. Because my nephew came down here and he went to one of the high schools down here. And when he said, I did that 2 years ago. So he said, I don't have to do any of the homework. And he used to give me a fucking hard time, a little shit. Now he's a nicer kid now that he's grown up. But then when he first stayed with me for about a year. But, that's the reality. So I don't think, I think that schools need to push young people to become better, not basically say, oh yeah, you're dumb, we're going to put you at a low level, we're not going to ask anything of you, we're not going to push you, we're not going to basically demand of you more. I had teachers in Greece breathing down my neck, pushing me to get better. And I can tell you, I advanced very quickly. I had one of my closest teachers was my physics teacher. My last year, I got an 18 out of 20, so I had a very good mark. But I used to go to his home. I had a good relationship with his son as well. So, yeah, it was very different. They're more part of the community. Teachers there, like the priests, very much part of the community. I used to play cards with one of the priests. They are part of the community. They don't put themselves separate, and that's why it's a very different experience than I've had. So I think that government schools that have got this sort of more cultural, close to the community and stuff like that, both from priests and both from, is a much better, I find it much better. They're part of the society. They're not sort of separate, on their little pedestal or whatever, but they're like demanding like parents, which is good. That's what you need. Anyway, so probably gone into areas that I ventured that I shouldn't have, but anyway, you probably learn more about my thinking on those issues. Born, yeah. Yeah, but also a lot of British people suffered as well under the Blitz. I know that my friend's mother, she was actually born at the time, and her family suffered quite severely. So, as I said, it's we need to separate the people from the elites. Fuck me. God, he's getting nasty, isn't he? He's getting nasty. God, he's getting nasty. It's all those xenoestrogens in your environment, mate. You need to flush them out. Boron. Boron is your trick. Get onto boron, T1. What is that? I get the impression he identifies as an attack helicopter. I do actually. How did you know? Yes, I'm not male. I'm an attack helicopter. And don't you forget it. Does Germany have a conservative faith based like Greece and Poland, for example? I think they do. They generally do. They are probably, yeah, it's really hard. You know, it's a mixed bag. The southern part of Germany, Bavaria and places like that tend to be more religious. The northern tends to be less. And the eastern part is very mixed. And it's because of the sort of Soviet era. But a lot of people sort of return to the faith or to their religions or never really sort of, you know, it's strange. But most of this sort of vegan activism and sort of that is happening in basically places like Berlin, the western part of Berlin primarily, which has more Americanization, and parts of areas like northern West Germany. These sort of parts, they tend to be a bit more liberal in those sort of attitudes towards veganism and some of this nonsense. So, yeah, those parts are probably the ones that are being, you could say, assaulted by the Church of Anorexia Vegana and their cohorts at this stage. So, you know, how that's going to affect the whole country, I don't know. No idea, you know. But they're not going to make much traction in Eastern Europe. That's one thing, or Greece, or Italy, or Spain. These countries will just basically tell them to royally, yes, because they do have strong traditional cultures and they're not going to put up with that nonsense. You're welcome, mate. Take care. I wouldn't actually say that. I actually visited Germany. Well, I went through Europe 2006, but one of our key spots was to go and see the World Cup soccer at the time. So I enjoyed that. We would have some fun when we were playing the Brazilians, Australia versus Brazil, and let's say we met and partied with a couple of Brazilian people at the time. So yeah, it's all pretty good. They were trying to probably, yeah. Too much anal sex probably turned them to veganism. Is that what you're telling me? Oops, did I say that? Oops, sorry. Yes, but I wouldn't classify the German people as that. I do have German friends, and they're very good friends of mine, and in Australia as well. I'm not talking about it in Germany. I'm talking about Australia. So yes, but I suspect there are perverts everywhere. There are perverts in Australia. There are perverts in Greece. There are perverts in every single country. They do vary in numbers from country to country, but they do exist. And weirdos and whatever else. And vegans as well. Oh, yes. Berliners have got a bit of a history of that. That's right. Even from the 20s, they have a bit of a history. The old Berliners, let's say, yes, they do say that they're worse than the Parisians. Yes, in that regard. They can even make a Parisian blush. Yes. Oh, yes. Specifically for Berliners, yeah. You're probably a bit, closer to the truth, so to speak. Yes, I just saw all those Berliners unsubscribing. Oops. Yes, but it's still, that's still a minority. These sort of people are still a minority, even in Berlin. So, but there are funny people. The world is made of a lot of funny people. I personally don't really care. Even transvestites and their lifestyle, it doesn't really bother me personally. It's not an affront to my faith. It's not an affront to my to anything, as long as they're not basically pushing their lifestyle down my throat, so to speak. Now I've given ideas to T1, haven't I? God almighty, I can imagine what he's thinking, or what he'll be saying shortly for me saying that. Anyway, got to be careful with the sort of words, the way I express these things, especially with T1 around. Got to be careful, very careful in that regard. But yes, definitely. Look, I had fun in Germany. I really enjoyed myself, and in particular Berlin, because that's where we were for the majority of time. And then we took a train to the Czech Republic. I enjoyed that as well. And then Andrew started buying so much fucking beer that we were basically rattling like with all our beer bottles. Did you miss that? Good. Thank the fuck for that. I'm glad you did. Anybody got any health concerns? Any issues they would like to bring up about their health? Oops. Where was that? Further up here. Exactly. And yes, they can. And German Berliners, they can party as well. Pretty good. Yeah, give him an inch, he'll take a mile. Yeah, I know. Very dangerous. You got to be very, very careful with T1. These transgenic sort of frogs are very dangerous. He's sort of this modified, evil frog. Yeah, that's true. I think we all do to some extent. I know there's some other woman that's actually on this that does as well. Where's everybody gone? Questions? Any questions? Okay. Is there any plant-based foods that you approve of? I don't actually approve, but I find less deleterious. Probably pumpkin, zucchini, things like that would be less of an issue. Let's say in the nuts, you probably have the lower oxalates, lower PUFA, lower issues would probably be macadamia nuts. And let me think. I'm trying to recall. So that. What else? Sort of probably some seagrasses are probably not as inflammatory or an issue. It would be that sort of, it would be very limited. Most things have some level of anti-nutrients. Some have excessive amounts of like phytosterols, which are not good. So in large amounts, that'd be a problem to probably getting past the gut barrier. and getting into the bloodstream and then incorporating themselves into red blood cells and stiffening them up, so you had less oxygenation in the more thinner blood vessels. So that's another issue with plants that I find. So if you're going to have some plants, have some herbs and spices for taste, but it would be just those general plants that I'd say a small amount, not an issue, but large amounts on a daily basis can be an issue. It depends on the person's biology as well, genetic heritage, whole lot of factors, how optimal. You can still live suboptimally for a very long time as well, if you don't succumb to certain diseases and all that some of this stuff gives you susceptibility. So it's very, and that's why we have all these confounding sort of situations. It can be higher in oxalate, and while it's a good source of potassium, it has double the potassium of a banana without the sugar. It does have some oxalate issues, so I would, if I was going to consume it, I would combine it with some dairy, some cheeses or stuff like that to add additional capacity. I'll show that. T1 got unshown, so I showed him up. And yes, it's all that crap. Must be all that crap. So it's probably, you combine it with things that will minimize the actual oxalate issues. But then again, with some people, some of the other polyphenols in there can be some reactivity with some people that don't handle them very well, and I don't know which part, where you are on the planet, but if your ancestry is from the northern part of Europe, you may be susceptible to salicylates. That's probably the biggest problem with avocados. So Southern Europeans, not an issue, salicylates. So coconut oil, coconut products, avocados, got plenty of salicylates, not an issue. But if you're a Northern European, you may be susceptible. It's a mixed bag. The people that have got less, so were there more Romans in your area having sex with your ancestors? Means that basically you probably have a salicylate, protection. On the other hand, if you don't, then you probably don't. And those foods will probably not agree with you as well, especially with your gut. So you can do a salicylate sensitivity test, which is one way of doing it and finding out. And if you pass, well, maybe you can incorporate some of those foods. That's up to you at the end of the day. As I said, while I do a 95% carnivore diet, I don't basically tell people what to eat. Never have. I just tell them, this is the science, what the science tells us, the best science. This is what the N15 data tells us. This is basically what is more optimal. What you choose to do is your business. It's your body. It belongs to you, not me. And you live with the consequences, so to speak. Does cholesterol cause any concern? Absolutely nothing. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Cholesterol is regulated by genes. Simple as that. 85% of your cholesterol is produced by your liver. So your dietary cholesterol has nothing to do with it. So it's all to do with your liver. If you consume more cholesterol, your body will downregulate the production of cholesterol, and it will achieve the level of cholesterol that it needs for whatever reason. You get a virus, it goes up. Why? Because you need basically cholesterol for the immune system. That's why the worst time to actually have a cholesterol test is when you're sick, because it'll be very high. So you have to be well, in good condition, and it will be much lower. That's why, and it usually fluctuates throughout the whole day anyway. So, it's a very poor marker, and it's associated with nothing. Actually, people with the highest level, which is the Framingham, the longest study in the world in terms of observational epidemiology, which is basically piss poor science, observational science, which is the Framingham study, showed that people that had the highest cholesterol, more than about 92 or 93%, I can't remember exactly, were still alive after 30 years. The people who had the lowest cholesterol, only 73% were still alive. There were more all-cause mortalities with people with lower cholesterol than with higher cholesterol. We know that people with lower cholesterol also have more neurological issues. Most criminals in jail have lower cholesterol levels. Most people with a number of disorders, bipolar, along the line, schizophrenia, all these things tend to have lower levels of cholesterol. So I think that the cholesterol issue is basically tied up with all that nonsense and Ansel Keys, that poor science that was done back then, that basically put us on this wrong path. And the food industry's backed it up to the hilt because they benefit from it, from selling grains. So I think there is no concern whatsoever from cholesterol. There is zero concern. Your body actually normally regulates it how much it needs. The only time you have to be worried about cholesterol is if it's oxidized. Any lipids that get oxidized are a problem. Lipid peroxidation. That's the only thing that's going to damage to your blood vessels, to your endothelial cells. If that basically comes from rancid oils that are basically incorporated into the membranes of these rafts, your lipid rafts, and also these carriers of nutrition, and they basically cause damage. And they cause damage, also stickiness, plus sugar doesn't help. More glycating factors on the surface reduces that negative charge and makes things stick more. And if they stick more, what happens when things stick more? They tend to basically damage each other a bit more. So there's mechanical damage and also oxidative damage that can actually happen. So oxidized cholesterol, is an issue. Or to be more precise, LDL, oxidized LDL, is a problem. Cholesterol is just basically a waxy substance, which is neither good or bad. But the actual lipoproteins, which is the LDL vehicle that allows it to transport cholesterol, triglycerides, vitamins and minerals through the bloodstream, is basically that little raft that moves around that can be damaged. Anyway, we've got about 7 minutes to go. And yep. Will do. And but I'm not actually eating veggies or fruit anyway. Yep, not an issue. Veggies tend to be fruit tends to be the worst because it's higher in deuterium, unless you're in the tropics where you're getting solar radiation that basically depletes deuterium. It's basically from the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Germany. I've got it somewhere here, sort of. But I did an N15 on the ancient Greeks. I probably it's one of the things that I was going to have. That's why I'm not going to show you any information. It's one of the things that I was going to do with Bart. So it's something that we've talked about, but we never got around doing. But it will happen at some stage, where we'll do the proper N15 sort of. He's actually done a sort of thing, but I want to do it from the historical point of view, from the archaeological evidence and stuff like that. So yes, so it's something that is in the works, so to speak. So I may have to remind Bart and find out. Yeah, they always do. They always do. They pretty much ignore the Framingham study because it doesn't suit their narrative. See, they like all this small little, 1-year studies or 2-year studies or all this sort of stuff where they do these, what do they call the Mendelian genetic studies, and they go, oh, look, these people are sicker that have got this genetic thing. Oh, cholesterol's harming them. No, it's not. Because the Mendelian stuff is just telling you these are the genetics people have. Your bell curve, some more outliers produce more cholesterol, others less, have different levels for their physiology. And then they tell you, oh, these people that have got more cholesterol. Why? They're all on a sad diet. So they normally are all ApoE44 people. Now, what is an ApoE44? It means you've got longer resident time of the LDL because there are less receptors on the liver to take it out of the system, out of circulation. The more longer you're on a sad diet, a highly inflamed diet with a lot of shit in there, and these lipids are circulating for longer, they are more likely to get oxidized, aren't they? Voila. So they end up doing more damage. But if you're on a species appropriate diet, it's not going to happen because they're never going to be oxidized or glycated or damaged. It's, well, to a small degree, but the body can heal that. But to a massive degree, it's not going to happen. And that happens because you're on a buffet of sad shit all day. And these people are all on a buffet of sad shit. There are sad dieters, and they take the epidemiological questionnaire data of those and combine it with the genetics and go, oh, look, people that have higher LDL, but that's just people all on a sad diet. And it's people that are already sick. So they're already diabetic, insulin resistant. They're already got all these. Obviously, those who are sick and then have got circulating more of that LDL is going to be damaged. But it's not the LDL that's at fault. It's basically, it's in an environment where it's toxic. That's the difference. And that's what needs to be, made quite clear to these vegtards when they come up with these arguments that you're in an environment that is quite toxic. That's the difference. So, and when you look at the people that have got genetics like ApoE2s or 3s, they tend to have lower levels. Why? Because there's more receptors to take it out of circulation. So it's got less resident time in the system. So less potential to be damaged. So these people have to do, become way more sicker, but eventually they will succumb as well. Because even by small cuts, you can still bleed. Multiple small cuts, you can still end up bleeding to death. They just take longer because there's less circulating LDL to be damaged, so less oxidation, less damage to the endothelial cells, to your arteries and all that happening. It's taking longer That's the only difference because of less circulation. It's not as if you've stopped it. If you're eating a shit diet and putting toxins into your bloodstream, that's what the argument. And this is why these studies are misdirects. But when you're looking at a free living population that basically is just eating most of these people in the era of Framingham are sort of older, which tend to eat less out, in restaurants and eating shit or processed stuff. They tend to basically be eating more, you could say, homemade food, which is going to be less problematic. And this is why basically it's showing that when you're eating normal food, and even if you've got high cholesterol, you end up living longer, because you're not glycating your fucking body. So since you're not glycating, it doesn't matter if you've got high cholesterol. It's not going to be oxidized. It's not going to be damaged. So it's a non-issue. And that's what I mean being a non-issue. And that is why they hate this study. They hate this study. And you know what they point in the study? One thing. They point to people that have just been on the Framingham study for a small amount of time. In a couple of decades, in a generation forward, the data will look different. And you know why? Because the people now that are showing high cholesterol and high health problems are the people that are in my age bracket, middle age, which have been eating shit food for the last 20, 30 years, all of them. So obviously the people that have got more resident time in LDL are going to have worse outcomes. These older people had a much cleaner diet, show quite clearly that LDL is irrelevant. So LDL is only a problem because of the resident time, that it can be damaged, more of it quicker. So is it the LDL? No, it's the damaged LDL because you're eating shit, and that is why they point to these younger people and they go, look at these younger people that have got high LDL. They're actually having more health problems. Yes, because they're eating more shit, which is glycating and causing far more oxidation in their bloodstream. That is why. And because I've got more LDL, more of it's going to be oxidized and damaged compared to somebody who's got less resident time because of their genetics. What are you telling me? It doesn't prove anything. It just proves that somebody can be more damaged because of genetics, but at the same time, they're all getting damaged, but at different degrees or different rates, just because, they're eating shit. It's not the LDL that's at fault. That's doing its job, transporting triglycerides, energy, cholesterol to repair things, and to provide for cell membranes, which most of our body's made of cholesterol, the brain and everything else. The cell membranes have a whole lot of cholesterol in them. So it's providing structural material. It's transporting structural material and energy and micronutrients. That is what the purpose of the LDL is, or the VLDL, then IDL, intermediate density lipoprotein, and then LDL, low density. But that's their role. But if you damage them on their way, it's like a truck going around delivering stuff and then you run into it. That's the oxidant. That's the shit. Some drunk driver running into it and destroying it and just throwing everything around and making a mess of the place, of the road. Well, that's your arteries being made a mess of from the shit that you just had, seed oil, sugar, all this other crap that just made a mess of it. What are you going to do? Blame the truck? And say, oh, it's the truck's fault. That's what they're doing. It's the LDL. No, it's not. It's that shit that just came in and ran into the LDL, into that truck. Give us a break. So that's how you should be arguing. Anyway, we're over 3 hours, and I've got the later Eurasia one to do. So I'm going to let you go. Thanks for being around, having fun. Thanks for putting up with some of my rants, some of my non-dietary rants as well. Anyway, I hope it was informative on the nutritional side primarily. And, let's say it gave you an insight in other ways. But yes. Yes, exactly. It's the arsonist, not the fireman. Exactly. And it's not the truck, the LDL. It's basically the the person doing damage to the truck and all that. So, yes, exactly. That is exactly it. Well said. Tracy, well said. And that's the thing that, that people seem to forget. And, yeah, unfortunately, and we're still in this cesspool of politics, food politics. It's because basically we don't have good science. In physics, forget about the flat earthers. They're just idiots. All that little crowd that are basically just completely off the planet. I mean, I just thought of one just now. This is just a brain thought. Look at how solar panels are put around the world. When you go to different places, different latitudes, they have different angles. Why? Because the Earth is round. So you have to get the sun, the rays. So it's very easy to work it out. You fucktards, you cockwombles. If you've got a solar panel, just change the angle and you'll realize that you're on a rounded Earth, you cockwombles. Simple as that, because you'll be able to see your energy going up and down appropriately as the angle changes from what your latitude is. Very easy to work it out, you cockwombles. Yes. I know Bart's having a bit of fun with you. I think he just likes that sort of stuff. It sort of tickles his funny bone somehow. It's all I can say. Nah, I don't need that hassle. That's just toxic. You'll have basically all the idiots. I'll have basically the whole transsexual community literally down my throat. Literally, sort of figuratively. Let me just say figuratively. They would like it literally, and it would just be so toxic and so negative to put up with that sort of crowd or those sort of people. No thanks. And that's why I sort of try to stay away from that sort of stuff, because it's just so brutal, and these people are just unrelenting. They just crazies. So yeah, I enjoy this. I don't need the frustration or, the mental anguish, so to speak. So that's why I pretty much avoid it. Yes. Yep. The veg tarts love that. Yeah, give them those soy boys. Yeah, they love that fucking estrogen. They want it any way they can get it, mate. Chris, they love it. They salivate over that. If it's not estrogen, it's basically, it's not doing it for them. Look, I try to steer away even from religious matters as a Greek Orthodox person, because I'll probably end up upsetting a whole lot of people of other faiths. So I stay away from that completely, because that's just another toxic cesspool, and I'm no thanks. I can spend my other days in a far. Yeah, it's exactly not worth the stress. You achieve absolutely nothing. You help no one. You help absolutely no one. At least here I'm providing information to help people improve their health and all that. In that sort of cesspool, yeah. Yes, he loves the fanatics as well. He's a troll fanatic, aren't you? I know you are. That's why we love you. Yes, definitely not changing anything. I'm sticking to the actual food. Minus a T2 would be a plus. Oh, that's nasty. God. Exactly. We would miss you. God, that's not cricket, as we would say down here. And you know exactly what I mean, you Perthy. You Westie. Exactly. You're from the eastern side, aren't you? Yes. Much more respectable, nicer people. As I said, my sister went over there to Perth. She's gone to the dark side. She'll probably organise a gang on me. Knowing my sister, she can be a bit harsh. The younger one. Yes, I'll probably get some. If she sees this, she'll probably send me some rude SMS, or more precisely, MMS. Yes. Upset those. No, not really. It becomes really. Yes, yeah. I mean, Bobby's pretty good. He does a bit of that sort of stuff, but I know even from Bobby, he's, because especially with some of the also ethnic stuff that he's brought up and all that, he's really had a lot of flack recently. So he's sort of it's stressful for him as well, and it's very hard for him as well, and probably for some of his family as well that have probably been threatened. So yes, there are. That's the danger side with politics. People, God, some people get really crazy. To all the other religions are wrong. You would have millions. Yeah, probably. Yeah. This is the craziness. You basically try and help people to heal their provide them with information that can be useful for them to improve their health. Nobody wants to know. And then you basically, you throw a grenade in there and you kill a whole lot of people, and they all want to fucking know. Yeah, there's a bit of a dark side there with humanity, unfortunately. A bit of the tribalism still there. We sort of really haven't evolved that much. Yes. Yes, very much. Yes, be very careful of these Westies, Tracy. Very careful. No. Yeah, look, and that's the problem. There are quite a few crazies out there, so, and it's like, Bart likes to take, it's probably one reason I don't do these sort of critiques on vegans. I just don't do videos on them. I just fucking ignore them, I'm not completely interested in them. It serves no purpose. It probably would get more clickbait, I know, probably, stuff like that. But it also brings a lot of toxicity with it as well. Look at Bart, with all the toxicity that he's getting from, from Michelle and many others. So I don't do YouTube for. I've got a day job. I'm comfortable. I don't really need YouTube in that regard. For me, it's more to try and I'm a sufferer of cardiovascular issues. It's more to help other people. That's the only reason I'm doing it. That's my focus. And I do it in my own style, in my own, I'm my own witty style. I'm a bit witty in my character. People that know me, even women friends of mine, even though I've got a partner, I tend to flirt. I'm very flirtatious. I'm this sort of person, and some people like that, some people don't. That's fair enough. I've got certain, but yeah. Vegans do say that the Bible confirms a vegan lifestyle. I kid you not. You've got to be fucking kidding me. So that's why all these faiths used to sacrifice animals to basically, the Jews used to sacrifice animals because they were vegan. So they sacrificed animals. Try work out that logic. Just that. Forget about eating animals. Just the sacrifice of an animal that they did is supposed to be, the animal. Well, that's another ridiculous thing. They didn't eat apples. They didn't eat anything. They were, they were breatharians. They weren't even vegan. They were breatharians. That means they lived off nothing. They didn't need anything. It's only when they turned their back and ate. What did they eat? The fruit? The high deuterium, evil high deuterium fruit that the devil passed on? That they fell from grace? They were jettisoned out of paradise? Well, so they don't have an argument. Look, faiths, even the Greek Orthodox faith, when they do fasting, it's you abstain from meat. You abstain from the flesh of animals. Yep. And you can do the fast any way you like. I mean, I know that my mother used to basically cook these traditional, it's not spinach, it's a wild plant. These are wild plants, herbs, and she used to cook those, add a bit of sort of garlic and onion to them, olive oil on certain cases. Some cases you couldn't even add olive oil, so you just boiled the stuff and you just added basically pretty much vinegar and lemon juice or something like that. That's what you had when you're on the fasting day, So it was a very low carbohydrate type thing. Nowadays, a lot of people, they will fast and then have their first meal and they have a whole lot of carbs. But that's not the tradition. Okay? Still, the monks will have a lot of they grow their own leafy greens. A lot of these sort of wild plants, the old wild plants, that don't have the sort of oxalate issues that spinach has or kale or anything, all these sort of man-made crap. These are more traditional, very high in antioxidants, plant sort of compounds that have sort of a hermetic effect or upregulate glutathione or have a similar, they respond very similar like to resveratrol and stuff like that. So they're not negative sort of stuff. And they grow them around the monasteries and that's what they cook. And the older that are more frail, that can't do the fasts, they usually have fish. So they're allowed to have fish with those vegetables and stuff like that. That's what they eat, But they also have sheep and lamb and goats around, and they usually basically have, in the other days, the dairy, the meat and stuff like that. Organ meats, they eat everything. These monks, they eat everything. And I've been to monasteries, so I know exactly what they do. They eat everything. Only on the fasting days. So on a fasting day, it's basically, it depends. You either do a complete fast, abstention of all food, or you do something which is near to a vegan type, eating, which is just greens and all that. I wouldn't call it vegan. It's just basically because they're not doing a vegan lifestyle. They're just on the fasting days. They're just eating non-meat. They're abstaining from meat and they're eating vegetables. And on the other days, they're eating a whole lot of meat. So they're not vegans in their lifestyle. They're just basically abstaining from those things. It's sort of basically, it's like doing penance. You're abstaining from enjoyment, of any enjoyment, earthly enjoyment. So that's the whole thing. So fasting for them is, no sugar. So you don't eat sugar. You're not supposed to eat sugar. Even though there are many, modern day Greek Orthodox people that when they break, they all eat sugar and they'll eat, all this sort of. But we're talking about, that's not what what people used to do traditionally. One, they didn't have supermarkets and all this sort of available crap. So what they used to would cook would be basically, things like lentils, beans, those sort of things would be cooked or monks tend to not even cook those. They tend to basically go for the really vegetables. They really want to be pious. They don't want to have really any. They really want to have much deeper. Or some will even go to the next step where they'll fast completely with no food. So it's more. That is the reason why they do it. It's a very different. It's basically abstaining from pleasures of the world. No sugar, no animal products, none of this that is pleasurable. You go really to nothing or to some sort of bland foods. Not even olive oil in most cases. Most fast, not even olive oil is allowed. It's just you can only put lemon juice. And even there, you don't want to. You're not sort of technically. You're not supposed to put too much lemon juice. You're not supposed to, that blandness and all that it's sort of part of that, that theological sort of, that you're basically suffering in a sense. You're basically denying your body, the nutrition that it needs. And the people that are not allowed to do it are people like who are pregnant, people who are children and growing. So, because I actually asked the priest once and he said, no, you're too young. You're still growing. Not allowed. So you're just not. So it's basically you have to be an adult. And if you're frail and old, you're not allowed to fast either. The priest will actually literally give you a hard time about it. I remember one lady, the priest literally said, you should be eating. Why aren't you eating? You need the food, And she thought she was being pious and all that. And basically the priest was giving her a hard time because basically God doesn't want you to basically try and kill yourself or basically really hurt yourself. That's not the purpose. The purpose is basically to spiritually become closer to Christ. Completely different message. We can't confound. And I hate these people when they come in and try and actually impose their misanthropic ideology over my faith or any other Christian's faith. We don't subscribe to their misanthropic ideology. So I will not have it in a sense. Bloody hell, they did. They really enjoy their sort of stuff. They had flocks of lamb and if you take a look at the actual Middle Eastern lambs, they've got this big fat at the back of they've got this big hind fat pieces. It's haven't had anything. Oops. There they are. This is the middle. Comes up. This is the ancient Middle Eastern type sheep. They go away. Let me just share that quickly. And see all that fat back here? See where the legs are? Look at the fat. All this big bulging fat at the back. That's how they were bred to be very fatty, And even the old sheep and the old, livestock that we had were much fattier because that's where we got our energy, a lot of fat. It's only in the last couple of decades where we've had this anti-fat craze, where we've basically started to breed leaner animals. And this is why it's very hard to basically go back to an ancestral diet. It's going to take us decades to rebuild those old stocks, those old animals that were like that, exactly like that. And that's our problem at the moment. We would have to literally restore all that livestock, and that takes a long time. Probably 2 generations. It's a bloody long time. I'm not going to be around when it happens. And unfortunately, this is, I know I've gone on a bit of a rant, you know me, I can't help myself, T1, you should know that. Exactly. They definitely are. They say they've got something they call Satan or whatever they call that it's got in it. I always hear the vegans saying, I go, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that you'd be fucking just satanic, man-made crap, which isn't real food at all. So, yes, in that way. It's just a Eurasian stream now. Could be. No, it's not. No, it's not. That is happening shortly. I'm going to piss off because if I don't, I'll keep on going. See you guys, and I will probably see some of my troll friends later tonight. Take care. Be good to each other, and give those vegtards hell. Remember, the enemy is the Church of Anorexia Vegana and their supporters, the modern day food industry that just wants to sell and feed you kibble. Do not forget. See you guys. Thanks for staying around.